when you look at it on paper, who really is the hero of the story? You know, you're looking at Billy Costigan. He's become a cog in a crime organization. He is an accomplice to murder, accessory to robbery, to theft, committing crimes daily. Sullivan, even though he does commit crimes in this film, he's the guy who takes Frank Costello down. He gets Frank Costello captured. He comes up with that plan at the end. He shoots Frank Costello. He kills him. He takes Frank Costello out. It wasn't the undercover cop that took Costello down. It was someone in Costello's own organization who was his own spy who took him down.
Hello, movie friends. Welcome back to the show. We're very excited to go back to Boston and talk about Martin Scorsese's Oscar-winning film, The Departed.
We're shipping up to Boston, kid. Yeah, we're doing The Departed. Finally, we've been talking about Martin Scorsese the last couple of weeks with our breakdown of his entire career when we did our director spotlight on the iconic director. But now we're finally discussing The Departed by itself, solo episode. We talked about it briefly a long time ago in our best Boston-based movies episode.
That was an old episode.
That was like episode 15 or something like that. We did like The Departed, The Town, Good Will Hunting, Mystic River. So all sorts of great Boston-based movies.
Is that my daughter, Sean?
My daughter, Sean! But this is hands down the best Boston-based movie. It's like between Good Will Hunting and this for me.
I don't think it's easy. I think it's a toss-up.
Okay, it's a toss-up.
It's very debatable because I think Good Will Hunting's story is amazing.
You're right. That's one of the best screenplays in the century. Oh, in the last 30 years.
Yeah. You're like, wait, what year is it?
1997.
You're getting old, man. You're getting old.
But The Departed is a masterclass in filmmaking, and when you look at Scorsese's filmography, especially this century, it might be his best movie this century. It's like top 3 in his filmography, possibly. It's so well executed. I just watched it for the first time in a few years. I've seen it a ton, but I hadn't seen it since before we started the podcast. And I'm watching it now that I have like such an analytical way I approach watching movies.
He's wicked smart now
because of the show.
You're wicked smart.
I gotta pay attention better now. But I'm just watching this movie, astounded by the filmmaking, and the editing specifically is phenomenal. What a masterclass by Schoonmaker, his editor.
Thelma Schoonmaker won the Oscar for editing in this film, and I completely agree. She's actually won 3 Oscars for Scorsese films. She won for Hugo, and she also won for Raging Bull. Both just masterclasses of filmmaking as well and editing. She really is one of the greatest editors, if not the greatest editor in film history. And you can tell it's edited by her and shot by Scorsese. Their companionship as collaborators and artists and their duo chemistry is just unbelievable. It's like Edgar Wright on steroids in a lot of ways. Like the editing in this, the number of shots Scorsese gets and the way that she pieces them all together. Like, there's just simple scenes that every other filmmaker would just shoot very simply with either, like, a couple of shots, like a wide or some coverage. But Scorsese and Schoonmaker, they'll give you a dozen shots quickly edited within, like, 20 seconds that really sets the stage and becomes this, like, own little sequence. Just for, like, the simplest things of cadets taking a police exam becomes, like, an unbelievable feat of editing. Or just, like, the phone call between Colin and Bill, I think, is just incredibly edited. The way that they build the tension with that. Their pairing as filmmakers is one of the greatest of all time. In this film, he won Best Director for this film. And I know people like to say it was because, it was about time. And it was just like Hollywood saying, okay, you deserve an Oscar. It really, you could say it's definitely the best directed film that year. And one of the best directed films of that decade for sure. It's so well crafted, so well choreographed, and the editing, the music, everything that Scorsese puts into it is just like so insane. The level of care, craftsmanship, and just detail he puts into the film is on another level from anyone else.
And just to stay on the editing for a little bit, this entire film, so many great shots, like you said, a ton of different setups, a ton of different scenes spliced together so well, but so many cross-cutting sequences between Costigan and Sullivan in different parts of whether they're rising, like when Costigan's starting to build rep and Colin's starting to gain reputation in the Massachusetts State Police Department. He's getting promotions at the same time Bill's getting rep and people are starting to fear him. He's starting to become a member of the crew, and cross-cutting just different parts of their stories that match each other in tone and like kind of where the characters are at in their arc at the same time. But just like and then splicing together scenes that are going on at the same time with dialogue that fits so well together, like a puzzle piece where we're watching like Frank Costello talk, and then all of a sudden we're cutting to a different scene, but then we hear the voiceover of Frank and Costello talking, even though we're seeing a different scene, then cutting back to Frank, and then the scene turns into somebody else's scene. It's just really interesting the way that they were able to fit these pieces around, moving around.
And also,
If that makes sense.
no, yeah, I know what you mean, but the editing, the way they do it is really impressive in the first act because they basically cut a ton of sequences around the interviews. First Sullivan's interview, and then Costigan's interview, and they're just very simple interviews, but we're getting laced with so many scenes, whether it be like Costigan's funeral, Costigan's mom in the hospital and her funeral, and then we learn about his uncle, and then a couple of shot sequences with Sullivan as well, all like strategically placed amongst this overarching interview, which just takes place over like a course of 15 minutes for both men combined. It's really incredible editing, and I would say the contrasting of the cross-cutting of the characters is not, they're not on equal terms. So they're cross-cutting the journeys of the men as they're on completely different trajectories, because the first cross-cutting we get is Sullivan's rise as a police officer to a lieutenant detective of the state police. And then while that's happening, we get Costigan's failure to become a police officer, and then his descent into criminality, being arrested, trying to get street cred, and becoming a criminal. So I would say that's clearly a downward trend from what Costigan was initially intending for his life.
Well, I meant like the reputation in the streets.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I look at it as an ascent.
Oh, absolutely,
An ascent for Sullivan and a descent for Costigan. But then also we contrast emotional intimacy with both men. So with Sullivan and Madeline, Scorsese and Schoonmaker perfectly edit the sequence with Sullivan having erectile dysfunction and refusing to talk to his girlfriend Madeline about it, and just shunning her and basically leaving to go to work. A very uncomfortable, unfortunate situation for him that he wants to avoid. Clearly not something he's proud of. And then we get a cut with Costigan blowing up a car with other criminals, like kind of having fun as a gangster and having an exciting life. It's an amazing way that they cut those two scenes together very purposely to see the emotional journey both men are on. And then the third major one would be another intimate one where while Colin is on the date with Madeline, they're having that first date at the French restaurant, and there's that, they didn't have the duck l'orange, and then
Duck Varange.
I'm not French. Someone's going to unsubscribe. And there's that crazy looking dessert. It's a very charming scene, and he's a very confident guy, especially around women, and there's multiple instances of women like noticing him and him flirting with women, very small instances, and then the dinner scene cuts right with Costigan in the ER getting his arm wrapped in a cast by a doctor who he clearly sees he's attracted to her, but he's too, I think, afraid and anxious to talk to her, so he just remains silent, even though if he wanted to, he could maybe start a romance with this person, but he just refuses to even engage in a conversation. So you see, the contrast of the characters is laid out beautifully with the editing of the film.
Yeah, I want to, let's just set this movie up a little bit better before we start breaking down the characters too much, because there's a lot to break down and a lot to set up. Now, this cast is led by, obviously, Bostonian actors Matt Damon and Mark Wahlberg, as well as Leonardo DiCaprio, Jack Nicholson, Alec Baldwin, Martin Sheen, Vera Farmiga. You know that this $90 million budget, half of it probably went to the stars, I'm sure. This movie won, in addition to Best Editing, won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, Best Editing, Best Supporting Actor nominee for Mark Wahlberg. And again, it finally took Scorsese, 40 years to win Best Director at this point, something like that. The Departed is also a remake in addition to being inspired by real events and real people. So it's both a remake of the 2002 Hong Kong film Infernal Affairs and is loosely based on real-life Boston Winter Hill Gang. The character Colin Sullivan is actually based on a real-life corrupt FBI agent named John Connolly, while the character Frank Costello is infamously based on the Irish-American gangster Whitey Bulger. I'm sure you all know, or I've seen also Black Mass, which stars Johnny Depp, that is solely focused on Whitey Bulger. Now, Colin Sullivan being based on John Connolly,
Very Irish names.
Yeah, a little background on that. State and federal officers had been trying to imprison Whitey Bulger for years in Boston, but he evaded capture in 2011. That's when there was that big manhunt for a long time. They finally found him. As the FBI handler for Bulger and Flemmy, another gangster, John Connolly, who had grown up in the old harbor housing project with Bulger, had been protecting them from prosecution by supplying Bulger with information about possible attempts to catch him. Connolly was indicted on December 22nd, 1999 on charges of alerting Bulger and Flemmy to investigations, falsifying FBI reports to cover their crimes, and accepting bribes. And this is one of my favorite crime films of all time. It's phenomenal. And just a quick little synopsis is an undercover cop.
You guys say it in a Boston accent.
An undercover cop played by Leonardo DiCaprio and a mole in the Massachusetts State Police Department played by Matt Damon attempt to identify each other while infiltrating an Irish gang in South Boston. And again, this cast is absolutely stacked. Fun fact, Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise were originally tied to be the leads of this film. Not sure how that would have worked out, Tom doing accent, like a Bostonian accent. I'm not sure that would have fit so well.
He never does accents.
Sometimes there's like southern accents here and there.
I don't, and I think they both would have been too old for the roles.
A little bit. Back in 2006, maybe Brad would have pulled it off fine. But Brad Pitt, his production company, Plan B, did produce this film. Him and another producer purchased the rights to the Hong Kong original film, Infernal Affairs. And so Plan B, this is actually one of the first projects that they made with that production company.
And they won the Oscar. That's great.
It's incredible.
They actually bought the rights for only $1.4 million. So I think that's a great deal, honestly.
And obviously, Martin Scorsese, a master director, one of the best of all time, if not the best of all time, showcases a mastery of suspense. I mean, the last hour of this movie, I'm Costigan. I'm having a 24-hour panic attack, anxiety attack watching this entire movie. When receiving the top award from the Directors Guild of America for this film, Martin Scorsese said that this is the first movie I have ever done with a plot, which was really funny. The music, of course, it's a Martin Scorsese film, so the soundtrack is phenomenal with iconic tracks from the Dropkick Murphys, which really propelled them to like national fame and international fame because they were huge in Boston at the time. But
WBCN was playing them, but no one else.
Yeah, super clever of Scorsese to get like a Boston-based band and Irish kind of rock music into this movie.
It plays twice in the film too.
Yeah. Also, the Rolling Stones have a couple tracks in this film as well. The musical score is part of this film as well, which is kind of rare for a Scorsese movie. Not unheard of, though, but Howard Shore did the music for this. It's really beautiful. Lots of Western kind of elements in terms of it sometimes feels like a Western, as well as great acoustic guitar, electric guitar, all performed by Sharon Isbin, G.E. Smith, Larry Saltzman, and Mark Ribot.
The music that Howard Shore wrote, he was actually directed by Scorsese to write a waltz. So it's in the style of a waltz because... Of a tango, because it's two characters who are basically evading each other and trying to find each other, and so he wanted to illustrate that theme in the music. So it has the structure of a tango, the main themes.
Now, this film obviously directed by Marty, written by William Monahan. What an excellent script. IMDb, The Departed is an 8.5, and that puts it at number 39 on the IMDb user all-time rating list, where I think it should probably stay there for a very long time.
It's a great rating.
I think it's pretty solid.
Monahan won the Oscar for adapted screenplay, and what really makes this, because it's adapted from the Hong Kong film, what makes the writing really stand out is the authenticity. It feels real and feels like how people from the area talk. The slang, the lingo, the style, and also the attitudes. You know, I think a knock this movie might get from a lot of people is there is homophobia, there is racism, and there is blatant misogyny and sexism.
Yeah, a lot of offensive slurs.
Yeah, and Scorsese is someone who believes in, if he's telling a story about someone, you have to tell their truth, and you just have to be authentic to what this person is like. And if they're a bad person, they're a bad person. You're not going to sugarcoat it. And bad things are said in this film, but keep in mind they are either criminals or they could just be racist. And you know, just because a character is racist doesn't mean Martin Scorsese is racist. It's accurate to, you know, Boston has a history of it, and Scorsese actually opens it up with a great little minute sequence of documentary footage of riots and problems in the area due to racism in its history in the 70s especially.
Criminals are not politically correct. I think that's what a lot of people really need to understand is you got to disassociate a character in a movie from the artists behind the movie. I think there's a clear distinction that should be made. A lot of people don't want to make that distinction. They're criminals. You know, it's authenticity, like Anthony said. It makes it realistic. Also, Rotten Tomatoes has The Departed at 90% critic score and a 94% audience score. And on a budget of $90 million, it pulled $290 million at the global box office.
This is Scorsese's third most successful film. So a roaring success to win both Best Picture and earn that much. It's very rare for the Best Picture winner to earn a lot of money. Generally, it doesn't happen.
It's rare for a movie this violent to win Best Picture and Best Director. Obviously, Marty didn't think he would win because his entire career he was making movies like this. And then now it's 2006. He's like, oh, I guess I won finally, even though I've been making these movies for so long, and I had so many fights with the MPAA for ratings on a lot of my movies. I mean, when you compare this to Taxi Driver, there's way more violence, way more blood, way more graphic scenery. Obviously, it's a different time. It's not the 1970s anymore. It's the 2000s when this movie came out. So rating systems adjusted to the culture and what audiences could take at the point. But it's got so much more violence. It's just interesting that finally his career is now he can be critically accepted for the kinds of movies he makes.
You know what they do have in common is they both have a porno theater in them.
Yeah.
I just made that connection. I actually have a little game I want to play with you for this movie.
A game?
Yeah, so...
What kind?
Let's rate the Boston accents of the actors.
Oh, that's a good call.
Yeah.
All right.
On a scale of 10, the principal cast. So we'll both give them our honest rating.
Okay.
All right? And be critical. You know, we're from the area.
Oh, yeah,
we're not from Southie, but, you know,
Yeah.
we know it. Okay.
Boston Jim is.
Boston Jim's from Southie.
Boston Jim's from No, he's from Charlestown.
All right. DiCaprio, out of 10.
DiCaprio's, it's actually really nuanced because, like the character of Bill Costigan, growing up, his parents were divorced. His father lived in Southie, and his mother lived on the North Shore, so he had two different accents as a child growing up, which is why he was perfect for undercover work, because he faked being a Costigan in South Boston for a lot of the film. So a lot of the film, Leo doesn't really have an accent, but obviously he turns it on when he's with the crew, when he's with the gangsters. And when he has his accent, it's actually really solid. It's not over the top. He really just kind of flourishes certain phrases and certain words, like words with O's inside of them, or obviously the ka, like AR at the end. But I would say Leo did an 8 for accuracy to the Boston accent, even though he was very limited in what he did.
Yeah, the first time you really heard him lay it on thick was when he's talking to his cousin on the porch. That's when he really lets it out. I'm not a cop. I would say that Leo's an 8.5. I think that all around, it's very accurate. It does get a little exaggerated, sometimes unnecessarily, but for the most part, it's really solid.
But that's accurate to Bostonians.
Yeah. It gets turned on. The more obnoxious you are,
No, it just gets turned on in specific situations.
Yeah, exactly.
Like if you're at the Celtics game, kid, that's coming out like full throttle.
I would just say he drops it a couple of times, and it's too noticeable.
When he's with the gangsters, or
just throughout the course of the film,
because he doesn't have one.
Yeah,
I know.
He's
turning it on. The character. That's why it's really nuanced. And it's actually really good. Like when he's with Dignam and Queenan the first interview with him, he doesn't have an accent at all.
He has an accent.
Not really.
He's got a thick accent.
I just watched it.
I did too.
I think you didn't pick up on it. It's hard. Half the scenes he doesn't have an accent at all.
It's a mild accent. I'll give you a mild accent.
But he turns it on when he's with the gangsters.
But it's not no accent at all.
But he turns it up when he's Bill Costigan.
Yeah.
Versus who he really is in real life.
Every weekend. All right. Next up, we have Matt Damon.
Matt
Damon.
Obviously, he's from Cambridge, and I would say that his accent in Good Will Hunting was better than this one, because as an actor, obviously, they're trained and they have to train themselves to get rid of their accents. So in real life, they don't really have accents anymore. So it's kind of interesting when you watch someone who had an accent lose it, then try to bring that same accent back. I think he did a really good job with it. Sometimes it felt a little over the top, but also that's accurate to Boston, especially like a statey, and especially a cop. So I'm going to give it a 9.
I'm giving Damon an 8 out of 10. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's mostly terrific, and I just think sometimes it's a little too much, and it's a little too much for, I don't know, such a high figure in law enforcement.
Have you ever talked to a cop?
Maybe a street cop, but
they're all like that.
I know.
It's the stateies.
Well, how many cops are you talking to?
You talk to plenty. Every time we drove past a cop with that
cop
accent. Hey, Stevie!
Yeah, cop accent. Cop expert over here.
Cops have thick accents in Massachusetts.
Yeah, that's true. It's absolutely true.
I think that's why it's good. Mm-hmm. That's why it works.
All right, Jack Nicholson.
Jack's, I'm going to give him a 7. Sometimes it's not there. Sometimes it comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
He just kind of sticks to the ahs like a lot. But still, Jack.
Bury him
great.
in the mash.
Because
When I say bury him in the mash, I mean in the mash.
I'm going to give him 7.
I'm giving Jack a 6.
Yeah.
As much as I love him, and I do really love this performance, I think it's extremely underrated and not talked about at all. In his career, it's really up there. That being said, the accent is just non-existent sometimes, and then it's a little too much on the nose with there's more than just dropping your R's for the Boston accent, and he misses like the O vowels. He doesn't say it properly a lot. So I'm giving him a 6. I think he obviously one of the greatest actors to ever live, but the accent wasn't there for me in this. Okay, next up we have Vera Farmiga.
Vera, I would say she's pretty good. I'm gonna give her a 7. Some scenes her accent's excellent. Some scenes it's pretty decent. Just I would say like it's a 7.
I'm giving Vera a 6.5 just because it doesn't. I remember the first few times I saw the film. Sometimes I'll be like, "Oh, wait, does she not have an accent? Oh, she does have an accent."
Yeah, it comes and goes.
It comes and goes, and it's not always there. I'm guessing that maybe as she was filming, she was getting it thicker and getting used to it. But I would just say because there's definitely some dialogue with her where there isn't an accent, and then there's dialogue where there is an accent. So the inconsistency, I gotta give it a 6.5.
Okay.
Next up, we have Alec Baldwin.
Alex accent, he's so good in this.
outstanding.
I'm gonna give him a 9. I think he nailed the accent so well, and he doesn't have a ton of dialogue, but when he's speaking, it's pretty memorable, and I think he did a great job. I'm gonna give him a 9.
He's a scene stealer in this. His lines are great. I'm giving Alec 8.5. He did very good. He feels Boston.
He feels like
feels
Bostonian.
Bostonian. And he's just hilarious in this film. And he looks like a Bostonian. He looks like he would he looks like his position. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I totally
Perfectly
buy
cast.
it. I totally buy it. Okay, next up we have Mark Wahlberg.
I'm giving Mark. I'm giving him a 10 out of 10. I think he's got the best accent in the movie. He based it off all the cops that arrested him in his youth. So I'm gonna give him a 10 out of 10. I think it's the most convincing, and he's the most convincing Boston tough guy I've seen in a lot of movies, probably.
Yeah, I'm giving Wahlberg a 10 as well. It's perfect accent, but also he adds in the nuance of the dialect of words people use from that area, of
Idioms, phrases,
how they speak. And so I think adding that just puts him over the edge of just being completely accurate and probably one of the best in film depiction of the Boston accent.
The insults and kind of like the ball busting, that's huge in Boston culture. So that's why it's all over this movie. He did a lot of improvisation in this film. Marty loves improvisation. Jack did a ton as well, but not really. He did it more just for the craziness of Frank Costello. But I think that Mark's improvisation as Dignam was really accurate to the ball busting culture in Boston.
And Dignam, he just looks like he was like a hockey guy.
Yeah.
He looks like he was just like a Boston hockey player all his
went
life.
to BU.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I get that vibe from him. And he feels like a hockey player. All right, next up we have Martin Sheen.
Martin's great. I'm gonna give him. It does get a little bit throttled up too much sometimes. I'm gonna give him an 8.5 though.
8.5?
8.5. I think he did a great job.
I'm giving Martin Sheen a 7.5 because it is very good for the most part, but he goes a little too hard on the R's sometimes, which is inconsistent for the other times he says the R's. Some actors, I think if a sentence ends on an R word, they'll accentuate it too much or exaggerate that too much, whereas they're missing the R words in the middle of sentences. And I think Martin Sheen does that in this film.
Yeah, that's what Jack does too. He'll see the AR at the end of a sentence, and he only does the last word.
Yeah. So, but then they'll miss it, and if their ARs or 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 whatever is in somewhere earlier in their dialogue, they'll miss that one, but then when it ends with that kind of word, they'll really go at it, and that inconsistency just keeps it from being totally believable.
Yeah.
But I mean, talented cast, they all did a really standout job. It's a very difficult accent to get right.
It's not just the AR. The words with O inside of them are really important too. Like something like store. Like a lot of people don't do those in movies.
Or mom. I gotta see mom.
Yeah, okay. I didn't know what you said for a second.
A lot.
Yeah,
I liked it a lot.
Yeah. So the O words are just as important as the AR words.
Yeah, and people, I think most actors always miss the O's. They just think it's R's.
I'm surprised there wasn't a single wicked in this movie.
There was no wicked.
No
You're right.
wicked.
Not a single wicked.
Oh, you're wicked smart, huh,
That's
guy?
wicked awesome.
Yeah, no
I wonder
wicked.
why.
Maybe Monahan didn't realize how important that was to Boston slang.
But I feel like,
But even the way I just said Monahan, like Monahan.
Monahan. I would feel like Damon or Wahlberg would be well aware that the wicked should be in there sometimes.
He's got to know because he nailed the culture of Boston so well. Even something like the Knights of Columbus, bringing that up, like things like the Knights of Columbus, the Elks Club, the Lions Club. Those are all like men's clubs that do charitable work and like they have organizations.
It's also just for guys to hang out. Guys to hang out.
Yeah, there's just like male communities. They drink at a bar. They drink at the Knights of Columbus. You have like a banquet
they
there.
Have fundraisers.
You have like a birthday party there. But let's get into this because I think they really nailed the culture of Boston so well as the wardrobe seemed really accurate to me as well. You know, Boston has a very blue collar aesthetic to it in terms of how people dress. You see a lot of blue jeans, you see a lot of polo shirts as well as. But they didn't nail in the movie because they're probably rights. They did a little bit with the Boston sports apparel.
Yeah.
When you walk through Boston, you see a ton of Bruins, Red Sox, Celtics, Patriots, T-shirts, jerseys, hats everywhere. Obviously, Leo wears the black Boston Red Sox cap in this film, which I think is incredibly accurate and just like authentic to someone from Boston.
For that era.
Yeah, exactly. The black one specifically.
But also the zip-up hoodie.
Yeah, the hoodie.
That was like just a plain zip-up hoodie, which is a plain black tee, that with the jeans.
The white Air Forces.
So common.
As well as just kind of his wardrobe's accurate. I think Sullivan's wardrobe is excellent as well. Costigan, he's all over Frank Costello's all over the place.
That's different, yeah.
Because it's
Jack.
Frank.
It's Jack.
As well as I think something that Jack Nicholson refused to do was wear a Red Sox hat in this film. He has a couple scenes where he's supposed to wear a cap. He's just wearing an all-black cap, and that's it. It's kind of similar to how Ben Affleck refused to wear a Red Sox hat. Wear a Yankees hat in Gone Girl. I bet you Damon told him about this on the Departed set, and Ben's like, I could do the same thing.
I could get away with it.
Yeah, I can get away with it as well. Because Jack's a diehard Lakers and Yankees fan.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know he was a Yankees fan.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
He's a bandwagon guy.
For real. But the wardrobe is really accurate, especially even the hair. The hair is very accurate. Costigan has the Boston fade for most of the film, except for when he's in the academy. It's quite short. But that fade, everybody has that at some point in their lives in Boston. It's just so common. And also the cops with their hair, very accurate. But the supporting cast, the characters, they feel so Bostonian, especially Frank's crew. And ironically, this film was mostly shot in New York City because Massachusetts at the time had too high of a tax rate on film productions. And so the production was forced to go to New York for a lot of their sequences. Although after this film came out, Boston raised their tax benefits, so it became better for productions to film in Boston. I think this was an example. This film really set the stage for Boston changing their policies on that. It still feels very Bostonian. A lot of the interiors are shot in studios. I watched a behind-the-scenes documentary making of the film, and several of the scenes are just in big studios, and they build the sets inside of them. For example, the scene where they burned down that little apartment, that was just shot in a soundstage, and they just built that room. And on the inside, you have the set, and on the outside, it's just wood and beams and drywall. And it's just remarkable how Scorsese can just weave in these little bits here, bits there. The number of scenes he shoots is really impressive. And but for a film like this, even though they're not shooting in Boston for most of the film, it has everything. Everything looks right. The bar looks right. Apartments look right. Just like a random wall looks correct, like the way it should look. All the little nuances, the little details that you would see in an establishment in that city, I think was perfectly illustrated by the production team. The production designer did a standout job with this to help really make everything feel correct and feel like you were in that city.
Plus, this is 2006. They probably filmed this in 2005-ish, probably wrote it 2003, 2002. So this is a post 9/11 movie when there is still, the backdrop of that in the culture on a day-to-day life. And, I think it's the patriotism that the country felt at the time, which has since just kind of disappeared, is really prevalent in the film. Like, for example, Colin Sullivan's American flag hat that he wears in the sequence where he meets Frank at the theater and then gets chased by Costigan in the alleyways. That's a hat that you saw everywhere. That was a really popular hat that a lot of people were wearing for about 5 years to 10 years.
With the gold trim.
Yeah, after 9/11. There's a United We Stand banner in the bar somewhere. There's also
lots of flags.
A Made in USA box as a prop somewhere in the back warehouse. So lots of American patriotism sprinkled throughout the film because the country was still feeling the camaraderie of the horrific event of 9/11, what it brought to the country in terms of bringing people together. I think that patriotism is present throughout the entire film.
The unifying of a community.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it's a great opening too.
Oh, wait, can I say one more thing before you go on to that?
Of course you can.
In addition to the sets, so Colin Sullivan's apartment actually does not exist. The view of the Massachusetts State House was an effects shot from the roof of Suffolk University, which is the law school where Sullivan says he's taking night classes. Cinematographer Michael Bellhouse evaluated the shot during pre-production, so they shot that not even on location. That's just a great effects shot in the background, which is a really great example of what you were talking about.
Well, actually, there are a lot of just vinyl backdrops in this film. Scorsese used many of them in this film, more than I think he'd ever done in his career, whether it be the backdrop behind Dignam or Queenan's offices, the backgrounds in the windows of the precinct, Sullivan's home. Quite extensive use of the vinyl backdrops that Scorsese always strayed away from. But once you know they're there, you can clearly see them. But they work in the scenes, like they feel real, and it feels like it's like a real setting of a city behind you. That's just old school filmmaking. Obviously now the LED screens have changed the game, and you can add so much more detail, and you can change it, make it move. You can make clouds move. You can change the weather to be whatever you want. But back then, they just had to pick one image and then just go with that. This is it.
It's really bright. It's a nice sunny day today.
And what Scorsese has always infused into all of his films, but it really is exceptional in this film, is the energy and the propulsive energy of the editing and the storytelling. I mean, the first act of the movie, the setup of the two lead characters and the setting of the city, as well as you gotta get a general idea of what the story's gonna be. It's like 20 minutes. It's like its own little mini movie. And it's remarkable. The editing, there's so much jammed into this 20 minutes. It's astounding. And you get so much. You understand the characters so well. And what's actually different with Costigan and Sullivan is we get to see Sullivan from a child, whereas Costigan, we hear some exposition about him through his parents' divorce in the interview room. And I think that was a better way. We didn't have to see Costigan as a kid. Because that scene tells us everything we need to know about him. But I think Sullivan, we were benefited of seeing his rise from being a kid because it also introduced us to Costello, to Frank. And this opening 20-minute sequence, I think, is just marvelous storytelling. It's just so full of character, detail, exposition, and action. And it really just sets the stage for what world we're entering. And very few films ever do that. And I mean, how many scenes are in that 20 minutes?
The opening 20 minutes?
Yeah.
It's not a ton, well, actually a good amount, but also I love the opening exposition from Frank Costello. It's really interesting to get us a voiceover of the introduction to the character, finishing up with a shot of him walking into the light inside of that auto body repair shop where he's speaking to his young disciples, you could say, his young recruits for his organization, Sullivan being the brightest of them all and probably the most successful he'd ever had. And he's talking about Boston. He's talking about discrimination against the Irish, about the segregation of the communities. Everyone had their own slice of the city. The Irish had their own. The Italians had their own. So that's what Boston was like for a very long time. Every culture had their own part of the city that they stuck to, like many cities in the United States and melting pot countries. And
the early states.
Yeah, exactly.
The very early formative states.
New York, Boston, and Chicago, cities like that. And so now then he brings up JFK, that for 20 years an Irishman couldn't get a job. Now we had the presidency and how the culture started to shift, where now after 100 years of discrimination, the Irish finally had a right to claim what they wanted in the city, which is really interesting because there's a lot of great Boston Irish crime movies and Boston Irish movies. I think people love Boondock Saints and stuff like that.
I don't like that movie at all.
A lot of people like that movie.
I don't like that movie. Oh, my God.
But there's a rich history of Irish culture in Boston. Not necessarily crime, obviously. Almost all of it, not crime. But there's a ton of Irish. There's a ton of Italians. Usually Italians get the most movies and content and entertainment based off of their stories for film and TV. But I do love seeing an Irish-based or Irish culture represented in a film like this.
So what makes it unique, though, is so in Boston, especially the time when we were growing up and the time this film takes place, it was almost like a badge of honor and a cool thing to be Irish, and people really still is. Yeah,
half of our blood's Irish Scottish.
Yeah, but like you'll see so many Irish tattoos, and just the pride of being Irish is really strong in Boston, really strong. But I will say, in terms of culture, it's not like it's an embracement of actual Irish culture. It's more of just it's Irish American culture.
Being Irish in Boston.
Yeah, being Irish in Boston. It's just like shamrocks and leprechauns
and clover
tattoos, and that's it. It's not like anything to do with it's nothing to do with actual Irish culture in Ireland. So it's actually its own separate thing. And I think that's where it's different from Italian culture in a city like Boston, where the Italian culture is still the heritage of Italian heritage and traditions are still passed on and celebrated. Like you get the great festivals and the great foods, restaurants, markets, whatever. So the culture is still infused in the neighborhoods there. But I think with Irish culture, it's not like it's Irish culture. It's just like I'm Boston Irish.
Outside of like pubs and stuff like that.
You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
No one says sláinte when they're doing cheers in Boston.
And it's not like everyone's drinking Guinness, you know? So there's
a good amount of Guinness being drunk, though.
Yeah, but it's not like in Ireland where all they drink is Guinness.
But so many great Irish pubs and English pubs in Boston. You know, I think one of my favorite. I don't know if it's an Irish pub, but the Green Dragon Tavern. That's where the Sons of Liberty.
The Paul Revere one.
Sons of Liberty used to plot their stuff. So their revolt. That's where they went. It's still there. You can go. They have great shepherd's pie. The Green Dragon. It's on the what's it called? The Red Trail. What's it called? The Freedom Trail.
Freedom Trail,
yeah, Freedom Trail.
You know what? I always
which is a red line that runs several miles throughout Boston and connects you to all different historical sites.
And speaking of Boston landmarks, I always had a connection to this film in particular because of the State House. And our mom worked at the State House as a secretary to a state representative there for many years, and so she worked in the State House. And the State House is, it's a nice building, but it has this beautiful golden dome, which it's famous for. And it's definitely one of the most famous structures in Boston, the city. And sometimes our mom would take us, like maybe once a year, to go to work with her, and we'd take the train and
take the purple line, the commuter rail kid from Waltham Moody Street.
Yeah, and we'd walk through the Common, through Boylston and Tremont, and then we'd walk up to the State House, and we'd go into the State House, and it was really this big government building. And but the Golden Dome, like I always relate to Sullivan's character in this. In the open, we see Sullivan's attraction to the Golden Dome immediately after their rugby match, and they're sitting on the bench, and he's just staring in awe at the Golden Dome. I felt like that when I was a kid, like in that same spot, like right in the Common. And
your father only sells tombstones.
That's not James Badgedale. You just changed his line. That's smart. It's a good reference, bro. Everybody knows your references are out of control. So I always had this connection to the Colin Sullivan's character in this because of like how cool I thought the Golden Dome was of the State House when I was a kid.
And you wanted to, exceed your expectations of what you could do in life and try to be
I wanted to infiltrate the
politics.
I wanted to infiltrate law enforcement for the mob.
Well, Colin really wants to go bigger than that and wants to be as influent as possible.
I completely agree. I think that Colin is.
Should we start breaking down the characters?
Yeah, let's start with Colin.
Oh yeah, so we got Colin Sullivan played by Matt Damon.
He's terrific in this film, and he's perfect. Jim's having trouble there with this set. That Riddler figure came out of nowhere, man.
Did you see that? He jumped
at me. Went for you.
He just went for me.
He went for you. Colin Sullivan's a really great character, and he has a terrific arc. And his motivation, he's very much in the gray area because at first he very much is this. He's a soldier for Costello, and clearly he's Costello's greatest protege. He showed his intelligence early on, and I'm sure Costello whenever he's in the neighborhood, looks for kids and to do them a favor, like he did with Colin, buying him groceries and comic book and stuff.
He probably looks for orphans specifically.
Yeah, looks for kids to recruit, and he doesn't force them. He says, "Hey, you know where I am on L Street. Come on down if you want to earn some real money."
Get him a couple loaves of bread, some milk, like comic books.
And he probably does that all the time. And then
you know where I am on L Street.
Those few kids that decide to actually venture out to L Street, then they'll be in the crew and work their way up. And then Colin is probably the most exceptional person that's ever been in Frank's crew, which is why he handpicked him to be his guy to go undercover in law enforcement, to be part of the Special Investigative Unit, Queen's Department. And so Colin is exceptionally intelligent, but he can blend in so well. However, even though he starts out as a loyal soldier, the opening of the film, that gazing at the Golden Dome clearly shows that he has aspirations and he has things. He has a dream. He has goals, and it's definitely has nothing to do with Frank Costello if he's looking at the Golden Dome. And I think throughout the course of the film, it gets to the point where he decides he wants to completely remove himself from Frank's plan and just take this position he has and try to make it his own and move up in the world in his own right outside of criminality. And that obviously doesn't go according to plan when Dignam shoots him right in the face.
All right.
All right. But I think that I really think that Colin goes through this rebellious period where he decides to set Costello up. He pins him on purpose to get rid of him so that he doesn't have to have Costello on his back anymore, where he can just be Colin Sullivan, detective lieutenant for the state troopers.
Which is one of the main reasons why Frank Costello no longer trusts Colin Sullivan, and instead his most trusted adversary becomes William Costigan. Now, William Costigan on the other side, we can't talk about these characters singly. We have to talk about them together so much. Costigan grew up kind of a similar life to Sullivan, where he was a kind of a semi-orphan to Boston, into South Boston, where his parents got divorced when he was young, and so he grew up in the North Shore with his mother. But on the weekends, he'd be rough and riding down to Southie with his dad, Uncle. What was it called? His father's name was Junior. He's William Costigan Sr.
Yeah.
So Billy Costigan
I like
also
his Uncle Jackie better.
Very similar to Colin, where they're kind of very similar, but also polar opposites in a lot of ways. They're both very intelligent. William's very intelligent. Dignam says, "You're an astronaut, kid. You got 1,400 on your SATs. You're not a cop." Billy's clearly a very intelligent guy, and his motivation for wanting to be a police officer is really noble. He seems to want to bring honor back to his family name. His family, besides his father, was so infused in the crime in South Boston with Frank Costello. His Uncle Jackie was one of the only reliable, loyal, trustworthy soldiers that Frank Costello ever had. But his father never touched any of the crime. His father worked at the airport.
I'm saying he worked at the airport.
Who said he had a problem? I'm saying he had a fucking problem.
I just said he had a fucking problem.
We learn a lot about William Costigan Sr. from Costello. He says there's a man who could have been anybody, and he chose to work at the airport, meaning Will Jr. clearly has the same intellect and promise that his father had. His father just chose to live a more honorable life.
But also,
with the
he said
tips he was given.
He said he could have killed like 20 people to get to me.
Exactly.
No problem.
Your father would slit 5 guys' throats just to kill me, and he could.
He could do it.
That's a really cool thing to learn for, I'm sure, Costigan about his father. Clearly, Costigan is messed up. His mental health is very poor, probably from living this kind of double life. And, Dignam and Queenham, that's why they're recruiting him so well and intensely, is because he's played at being a Costigan in South Boston for every weekend his entire life growing up. So he's perfectly suited to play a Costigan from South Boston again. And, his mental health is poor when he's starting out because he really has no family left. His mother's just passing away from cancer. After his mother dies, he cuts connections to any other family he has. For example, his uncle, who's only pretending to care about his sister now that she's passing away from cancer on her deathbed. And Costigan wants to serve his community. He wants to serve Boston. I think he wants to bring honor to his family name again. And this is the only way to do it because he doesn't really know what to do with his life besides this. And he just wants to be a cop, but he can't be a cop because of who he is, where he's come from, because of his family ties to the Irish mob in Boston. That's why Queenan tells him you'll never, ever be a cop in Boston no matter what.
You sure about that?
I'm sure about that. So the only way he can serve the Commonwealth is to become an undercover. And
do you think that Queenan and Dignam are taking advantage of him? Because I think they absolutely are.
I think any person who goes undercover is being taken advantage of. I mean, your health and safety is for sure being taken advantage of.
So it voluntarily, though, they choose to do that position for Costigan. It's his only way of being a cop. So they're kind of using him like, hey, if you want to be a cop, this is the only way it's going to happen.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think they're definitely using him to their advantage to get into the ranks of Frank's crew, because Frank and these gangsters clearly care about family and the reliability of his father and both his uncle. For example, I mean, he's got his cousin, but his cousin's a jerk-off cop magnet of a cousin, so Frank wants nothing to do with him. But when he learns that Bill Costigan Sr.'s son is around, he wants to talk to him. So the familial ties are very important to even gangsters like this. It's not just the Italian mob. So that's also why, I mean, like you said, that's why they're never going to let him be an actual cop. So they're definitely using that to their advantage and leaving Bill out there to just possibly die any day.
Absolutely.
I think that they're absolutely like using him, taking advantage of him, putting his life on the line for their case.
100%, absolutely. Even though Queenan becomes a very fatherly figure to Costigan before both of their demise in the third act of this film. But I think Leo is so terrific in this role. It's really underrated performance. It's very nuanced. And he didn't get nominated because he got nominated for Blood Diamond. Instead, they tried to push that for his Oscar contention.
Warner Brothers did both films.
Which is unfortunate, because I think he probably would have won if they went with Costigan for The Departed, because he is terrific in this movie.
This is the better performance. Blood Diamond's very good. And Edward Zwick is a great director. He made Blood Diamond. He also did Last Samurai.
Danny Archer's the character, right?
Danny Archer, yeah. I am the cameraman. No, that's Jimmy on Hootsuite. I just love that line. I think it was a mistake to go with Blood Diamond. I'm guessing they did it because there's so many stars in this film. It might have been difficult with the Oscars marketing and advertising. And so with Blood Diamond, he's just the one sole male lead. G-Mon is the supporting actor in that film. And then you have Jennifer Connelly. So a tiny cast. And I think just for marketing, it just seemed to make sense for them more. But this is, without a doubt, the much better performance and one of Leo's best, for sure.
Yeah, the deterioration of Costigan throughout the course of this film is just incredible acting. He turns into just like a 24-hour panic attack of a character. And most of the suspense that you're getting from this film as it goes on, from the great directing from Scorsese and the editing from Schoonmaker, but also the performance from Leo as Costigan, just makes you feel on edge for the second half of this film completely. It's really intense.
Yeah, I remember back in the day watching this interview of Scorsese talking about working with DiCaprio, and he's like, I mean, you look at the scene where where Queenan calls him, even though he's dead, and then Leo just looks at the phone as it's ringing. He's like, he looks like he's terrified to answer, like really terrified to answer that phone. It's like, it's real.
Well, because the character knows, I'm dead. When that phone rings, I'm dead.
And Scorsese was talking about how DiCaprio can just really free himself and express emotions so authentically and realistically, and it's not just a guy acting. It's like he's actually like experiencing that emotion in the moment, and he's just so impressive to watch on screen. And I mean, I think that clearly working on this film solidified Scorsese being like, I'm just going to keep making movies with this guy.
Yeah,
he's
absolutely.
fucking awesome.
Gangs in New York was the first one they did together, then this one in 2006.
Then The Aviator.
Aviator was before this, right? In 2004.
Aviator was 04,
yeah,
you're right. Wow. Yeah. Wow,
so
that's
obviously,
crazy.
it's like it's his guy. But what I love so much about cross-examining Colin Sullivan with Billy Costigan is who's the real hero in this movie. I mean, when you look at it on paper, obviously you're rooting for Costigan this whole movie. The entire film, he's the hero in our eyes. He's portrayed as the lead, as the protagonist. But when you look at it on paper, who really is the hero of the story? You're looking at Billy Costigan. He's become a cog in a crime organization. He is an accomplice to murder. He's assaulting people. He's shooting people in the freaking knee. He's an accessory to murder, accessory to robbery, to theft. He's become a cog in this giant criminal organization committing crimes daily. Whereas Sullivan, even though he does commit crimes in this film, he's the guy who takes Frank Costello down. He gets Frank Costello captured. He comes up with that plan at the end. He shoots Frank Costello. He kills him. He takes Frank Costello out. And yes, Costigan wants to clean up Boston. That's like his main goal, is to get rid of organized crime and bring honor to his family's name. Sullivan's main goals are getting as much status and wealth as he can, affluency. That's his main goal, is kind of becoming legitimate. And it wasn't the undercover cop that took Costello down. It was someone in Costello's own organization who was his own spy who took him down, who you could even see Costigan foreshadowed to Costello in that rat conversation where he said, someone in your organization is going to take you out. Who's it going to be? So if you think about it, who's really the hero of the story?
Well, I would say, he takes Frank out, but he's also a murderer.
Yeah.
Colin murders the others, whereas Bill never murders. And he does have that conversation with Costello saying, if I want to think about murder, I think I could do it. I could do it.
Could I do murder?
What's the difference?
But if you make me threaten... But he's threatening Frank.
Yeah. But he's not a murderer. So I think that there's no way you can put... I couldn't say Colin's the protagonist because he is a killer, and everything. He doesn't kill for righteousness. He doesn't kill Frank for righteousness. He kills Frank to get rid of him so that he can rise in his own. He basically just wants to escape the life of being this undercover criminal and just become just the detective, Colin Sullivan. And so it's for his own gain and for his own reasons, not anything better than him. Whereas Costigan's doing it, kind of for the greater good and with moral intentions, what he's doing. So I would say Costigan is the protagonist, although...
Well, obviously, yeah. I see him as a protagonist, but they both... He kind of loses being a righteous person because he's committing so many crimes. He kind of becomes a criminal himself. He definitely does.
Yeah, but also then, Dignam and Queenan are involved in that too. They're letting it happen. They put him there. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So, man, who's not a criminal in this movie? But I just said something I wanted to speak on something I just said about how when Costigan and Costello are having the conversation in the bar about the rat, and then he says, when I think about, could I do murder? I think, what's the difference? It's actually a connection to Frank Costello in his opening monologue of the film. He says it to the kids in the mechanic shop. What's the difference? I think that's a really important moment for Costello with Costigan to really say, I feel a kinship with this guy. And I think that put him over the edge to make him trust Costigan more than anyone else, to have that same mindset of what's the difference. That line, it's super subtle. It's not really magnified. It's just kind of there, and it's an hour and a half after Costello says it, very early in the film. But I think that's the moment where Costello really feels a connection to Costigan and what made him trust him more than anyone else, to have that same exact mindset and to say the exact same thing.
Well, yeah, and then he needed the confirmation with the information about a shipment coming up from Gloucester. Did you hear anything about drugs? Anything about Gloucester? No, and I would have heard. That would have came directly to me. I think that was confirmation which made him his most trusted ally, which also makes you think, why doesn't he trust Colin anymore? And why is he kind of hesitant to tell Colin at the end of the film whether or not anyone knows about him? It's because Colin, like Anthony said earlier in the film, is starting to kind of lash out against Frank and starting to try to give Frank orders and disagree with Frank on things that Frank's doing. He's trying to get Frank to lay low. Laying low is not what I do, buddy. So I think that Frank's starting to see and is aware that Colin, he may lose control of Colin at some point. So he was probably going to plan on giving him up to the FBI at some point.
I also think that Frank is recognizing that Colin is trying to build his own life. Obviously, with having Madeline move in, that's not something that Frank ever wanted involved in the plan. You're supposed to be my spy, my rat on the inside. Whereas Colin, he's starting to build a life. You know, I think he enjoys what he does. He enjoys the leadership he has. He is beginning to like the life he's built, even though it was based on a lie. You know, he wants to live with Madeline. He wants to have a relationship with her. He wants to rise the ranks for himself, not for Frank. Obviously, he's going to be tipping Frank off, but like Colin is developing this really incredible world in this that he's built, this little bubble of his, and it has a great upside and really limitless potential. He's got an immaculate record, you know.
I have an immaculate record.
So I think that Frank clearly sees that, and having Madeline move in was a really worrying sign for Frank, I think, to be like, I can't trust this guy. He's clearly thinking about himself more than he is thinking about the organization.
And he's too clever. I can't keep someone this smart around me for that long. You know, he's going to take me out at some point. I think Frank knew that. And both Colin and Billy are trapped and highly vulnerable characters. They're trapped in the sense that Colin can't exceed his full potential with Frank in the picture. He needs Frank out of the picture to be able to, you know, fly as high as he wants. Yeah,
he can't be free.
He can't ascend to the heights that he could reach. And Costigan, he's trapped because even though he's undercover, he doesn't really have an identity anymore. His identity is only known by Queenan and Dignam. And if something happens to them, no one knows who he is. There's no proof that he was a cop, especially after Colin Sullivan deletes his file. But even before that, only 2 people knew the password to get into his file. So he doesn't really have an identity outside of being undercover. And if anything ever happens, he's trapped in that undercover lifestyle. And he can't just leave. I dropped something again. He can't just leave the undercover lifestyle because Frank will probably take him out. So he's trapped as well. And they're both very vulnerable. I mean, Costigan becomes so vulnerable by the end of the film that even in the third act, Madeline asks him and tells him, like, your vulnerability is freaking me out right now. Is it real? And he's very susceptible to his feelings by the third act of this film. And then Sullivan himself, he's vulnerable in the sense where he's clearly a very insecure guy. He's excellent at lying. He's excellent at playing the highly confident, highly controlled person in his work life, in his professional life, and even on the surface with his relationship with Madeline, like on their first date and everything, and like talking to her in the elevator to get her number, to ask her out and stuff like that. But, you know, when it comes down to it, Colin Sullivan is impotent. You know, he has ED problems, which boils down to insecurities and possibly stress. And you can see on the counter in his huge apartment, he's got Pepto-Bismol and Alka-Seltzer. So he's probably very stressed out because of his lifestyle and dealing with Costello, and he's impotent, which also begs the question, whose baby is Madeline's child? And when she gets pregnant, it could be Costigan's.
I think that's actually a good question. I think it's definitely Costigan's, and I think that Sullivan learns that at the funeral for Costigan because during the funeral for Costigan at the end of the film, Colin Sullivan notices Madeline across the area, and she's weeping. She is sobbing.
Well, I wouldn't say sobbing. She's
not sobbing.
She drops one tear.
Yeah, but she's crying.
Yeah, she tries to hide it, but she's
clearly crying. All right, she's not sobbing.
You're like, she's
on her knees.
She's in a puddle of tears.
She's wailing.
It's a waterfall. Like just one tear going down the cheek.
But okay, but she is crying. And that's
and then she looks at the photo of Costigan.
And that's a clear signal to Sullivan. He's like, what is going on? She clearly had a relationship with this guy.
Because Costigan accidentally brought up his police shrink. He's like, my only contact for the last 6 months has been a police shrink. And then Sullivan's like, does he mean Madeline?
And then he realized, oh my God, that's his shrink. And then also they're clearly had an intimate relationship. And it looks like she's in love with him and he's dead. Like it looks like she loved Costigan and not me. And then does that mean the baby's not even mine? So I think Sullivan even might realize the baby's probably Bill Costigan's baby. But I personally think that it's Costigan's baby.
Because even Sullivan is so shocked when she tells him about the baby.
Yeah.
She shows him the baby, the sonogram. Is that what it's called? I can't remember.
Yes, I think sonogram. Yeah.
That's probably wrong.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel right. Someone's going to correct us.
A sinogram?
It's a something gram, right?
I think it's sonogram.
It'll come to me. And he's like, really? Wow. Are you serious? I can't even remember when this happened. But Vera's terrific in this movie. And
She's
has
great.
A few really great moments in this movie, like the funeral, the look she gives Colin Sullivan, because she knows that he had something to do with Costigan's death. He might have even killed Costigan. He was the only survivor of this incident where 7 guys took it in the face from a handgun. And he's the only one who survived.
There's no way she believes them, yeah.
So obviously, and then I think another great scene for her is when she's listening to the tapes of Costigan. There are a few moments in this movie where you're like, like you drop whatever you're holding, like you're just like out of breath. Yeah, like, oh my God, what just happened? Like I think the the envelope, when Costigan finds it on Sullivan's desk, are just like jaw-dropping moment.
Oh my God.
as well as obviously the death of Costigan, jaw-dropping moment. I think another great one that maybe people don't talk about is when Madeline goes to the mail after telling Sullivan about the baby, and she sees there's a letter from Costigan to Sullivan, and she almost drops down to her knees. And then I think it's terrific acting. And then she's listening to the CD that was in the envelope. And then when Sullivan comes out, he's like, "Hey, what's wrong? What's happening?" And terrific nonverbal acting.
This is the first thing I'd seen her in. I can't think of anything before this that I had seen her in. And she's just a striking personality, extremely talented person. But she really gets the nuance of the character really well because she's dating Sullivan, but she clearly doesn't love him. And a great example of this is when Costigan and Madeline are having coffee. And he's like, he asks, do you love her? Do you love him? And she goes, it's a serious relationship. So she's clearly saying no. But the way that she delivers the line is like pitch perfect of someone who's trying to avoid revealing her full deck of cards. You know what I mean? And Vera is extremely charming. Like the dinner they have is super charming. And then the elevator scene, I love the elevator scene when Sullivan picks her up in like 30 seconds and they have that really, really cute conversation, like a meet cute in the elevator. I love that scene. It's like a moment of levity that the film needs. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It has moments like that where we can just like, sit back and just like and laugh and like, these two are super cute and they're both very charming and personable. I love that pickup scene. It's one of my favorite pickup scenes in any movie. And Matt Damon and Vera Farmiga had a lot of chemistry together.
I'll stab somebody with an ice pick if it gets me dinner with you. It's so funny.
And the people in the elevator look all shaking their heads.
Like, can you hurry up? He's like, what's... But it's great because it shows how fake Sullivan is. This is all a show. He's just trying to accumulate the things that would avoid suspicion of him potentially doing any wrong or being part of a criminal organization. He even tells Frank, and if it involves lying, I'm pretty fucking good at that. Everything about him is a lie. It's a facade. He's building this life, this huge apartment that he can't afford by himself because obviously Costello is the coast. I got a co-signer. Oh, so you're going to have a house guest. All right, that's cool.
Just give me the papers.
So obviously he's got this lifestyle. He's accumulating what he thinks will be the perfect image of him to present the world, and Madeline's a part of that. That's why I think, he has ED problems with her because he doesn't love her either. I think he just has her as part of his life, as part of the cover of who Colin Sullivan is because he doesn't really have much of an identity outside of being a mole in the Massachusetts State Police.
So I slightly disagree. I don't think that he's accumulating things as a cover, like in terms of like kind of like a serial killer would try to blend in. I think that he's accumulating things that he wants, and then because he gets the apartment with the view of the State House and the Golden Dome because that's what he wants. He doesn't. As long as he has a nice apartment, that's fine. You know what I mean? In terms of blending in, he chooses that one specifically, and Scorsese purposely holds on his gaze of the dome because it's the connection to him and his goals and his dreams and aspirations. He wants that apartment. He's not doing it for a good cover. He wants it. And I do think that he wants Madeline. I'm not sure that he loves her, but I think that he wants a relationship and he really likes her, or maybe he loves her in a way, but I don't think he's in love with her. But I think he's just maybe forcing it, not for a cover, but because he's trying to make a normal. I think that Sullivan's trying to make a normal life and trying to build a life that's separate from being a criminal and escape that life. And so Madeline, I think, is a piece of that. Not so much to blend in, but for something that he thinks he needs. So, and I also think that it was something that Frank wouldn't have wanted him to move in with a woman.
Yeah.
Especially so quickly into his career. So I think those are things that he did for him.
Yeah, outside of that elevator scene and some of the date scene, they don't have terrific chemistry as characters. Yeah. The actors are great together, but that's why it works so well, is because the characters, it's not really there. And even Madeline at the end of some sentences, she's like, do I really want to live with this guy? And he didn't put my sign up on my photo of myself up on the wall, whereas Costigan saw it immediately, put it up on the wall. He loves it because there's a connection there. And Costigan was very polite and kind of just held himself back from approaching her in a very professional way and respectful way. He waits until she like basically, I'm going to transfer you, and then asks, you want to get a cup of coffee? clearly there's a connection there because she
Yeah.
said yes, and they become friends and eventually intimate. But I think the intimate scene between Costigan and Madeline's really terrific. He shows up to her apartment as she's just packing up. She's got a few weeks left on the lease. Costigan, this is his only bit of joy in his life. The rest of his life is a goddamn mess. He's been undercover for over a year.
Yeah, and this is why he gives her the tape, because you're all I have, he says.
He doesn't give her the tape.
There's no one else. The evidence.
Yeah. And so he shows up to her house unannounced, and they drink tea, and this is terrific acting from Leo, where he's just on the other side of this doorway in her kitchen, and he's just forcibly like kind of holding himself back from entering the room. He's like playing with the sides of the walls, just like twitching a little bit, but it's really terrific physical acting for the character, which 99% of actors and actresses really don't do stuff like this. This is top tier stuff. This is like James Dean stuff. And it's really incredible. The performance, the vulnerability, you can feel it. It's so palpable, and it just adds so much to the scene. And I think it's a really terrific romance scene as well.
And to this day, and I noticed it from when I saw it as a kid, like it felt like an extremely realistic move, a move like a guy would move in to kiss a girl or any significant other. It felt like an authentic one. It wasn't like forced. It was just like Scorsese has them chatting in the kitchen. He's in the hallway, like you said, but then he cuts to a similar shot, not the same shot, but a very similar setup, and it's a two-shot of them, and she's sitting on the counter now, and he's just standing there, and you can imagine they've been talking for an hour maybe, and he's just been slowly getting closer to her, and then he finally just moves in to kiss her. It felt like, even the first time I saw it, I was like, that felt like a real kiss. You know what I mean? It just felt like a true to life, like the way someone would make the move to make the kiss happen. You know what I mean?
It seemed really polite and respectful. Also, cheating on your boyfriend. But aside from that,
great song choice too.
Yeah.
Comfortably Numb by Van Morrison. It's a terrific song choice for it.
Yeah, but the personal relationships, I think, are just great ways to show the contrast between the characters and how Scorsese's telling their stories. Like Anthony brought up earlier, when we're being introduced to these characters as Costigan's being a part of the gang and the crew, and Sullivan's making his way up the Massachusetts State Police Department. Anthony brought up how women seem to notice Sullivan. They go out of their way to like smile at him, and it just adds so much for the audience to understand the character.
Yeah, Darlene leans forward to say congratulations on the job.
Thanks, hon.
Thanks, hon.
Another great shot because Costigan's right there in the chair.
Yeah.
Which is terrific. And then what happens in one of the meetings in the boardroom? One of the girls is looking at Sullivan, whereas Anthony brought up earlier, when Costigan's getting a cast on his hand, there's a doctor that he could clearly talk to if he wants to. They seem about the same age, and he just doesn't look at her. I mean, he looks at her, but then he doesn't speak to her at all because, he's very private, probably really insecure, and doesn't want to speak to anybody. Doesn't have the confidence or want to get anyone involved into his life right now.
I think he's just an extremely anxious person, and aside from his familial connections, I think that Queenan and Dignam understand his mental health problems, his emotional problems, and his very short temper. He's a bad temper, and he has a history of incidents. So I think they understand he could be a loose cannon, and it's a really complex character. He is suffering from mental health crisis in a lot of ways. And I will say why my one knock on the film is that Madeline's character isn't a very good therapist in terms of the dialogue and what she's written as.
In terms of accuracy?
Accuracy. I think that the psychiatrist could have been written much better. It didn't feel right. And Vera Farmiga said that she showed the script to a psychologist that she was researching with to prepare for her role, and the psychologist said that Madeline does everything incorrectly.
It opens up where Costigan's cross-analyzing her.
Yeah.
And she's like, let's stay with you for a second.
Yeah, and then she says, she just gives him the two pills.
Why don't you give me a bottle of scotch and a handgun?
Yeah. So I will say that the psychiatry, the mental health aspect of the film and the treatment aspect, I think is a little too inaccurate, and that could have been different.
Yeah, I agree. How about we head to our intermission?
Oh, yeah.
And then we'll get back.
We're
there's
cruising.
Still so much to talk about with Sullivan Costigan. We still got to talk about Frank Costello, Big Daddy.
We didn't even talk about
as
him
well
yet.
as Dignam, Queen, and there's so much to get over. But before we continue, the best way to support Raiders of the Lost podcast is to become a patron of the show at patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost Podcast. We have 5 different tiers, $2, $5, $10, $25, and $100 tiers. Each one comes with a set of awesome perks. The $10, $25, and $100 tiers also get you access to our Discord. We've built an incredible community on there. We're interacting with you every day. We do watch parties, so make sure to check that out, as well as all the other perks for those tiers. Thanks so much for tuning into our show. And also, we're doing a live show on January 21st. Tickets are live on sale right now for in-person, as well as on December 15th. Live stream digital tickets will go on sale as well. Just go to the link in our Instagram bios or go to dynastytypewriter.com. On the calendar, you can find tickets to January 21st for our show there.
This episode is sponsored by movieposters.com, the number one place to get your posters online today. Head on over to movieposters.com and be sure to use our special promo code Raiders10 to get 10% off your order today. They have a huge selection of pretty much every movie and TV show imaginable in their poster library. So if you want some Scorsese posters, you got to head on over to movieposters.com. A bunch of our fans have used their promo code. We have a ton of these posters laced all over our home and our set. High quality stuff, super affordable prices. We couldn't recommend them enough. So go on over to movieposters.com and be sure to use our promo code Raiders10 to get 10% off your order today.
Now, let's head on into our intermission and begin with the movie quote competition. You ready, Anthony?
Ready.
But, Mrs. Mulray, I goddamn near lost my nose, and I like it. I like breathing through it, and I still think you're hiding something.
It's Jack Giddies in Chinatown.
JJ Giddis. Yes, sir.
Okay. Why do I fall in love with every woman I see who shows me the least bit of attention? Let me say it again. Hold on. I said it weird. Why do I fall in love with every woman I see who shows me the least bit of attention?
That's not 500 Days of Summer, but
Nope.
It feels like it is kind of like a Tom Hansen character. Man, it sounds like something I've seen recently, to be honest.
I don't think so.
Do you watch every movie with me?
I'm pretty well aware of what you watch.
Why do I fall in love with every woman who gives me the least bit of attention?
No. Why do I fall in love with every woman I see who shows me the least bit of attention?
I don't know.
Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Damn it.
Yeah.
Joel.
Yeah. He's talking about Clementine when she's working at the brick store and just like talks to him and he's like in love with her.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to our guess this movie release year section.
Let's go.
Easy Rider.
Good one. 1964.
69.
Oh, damn. Guess this movie release here. The Great Escape.
1976. No, 19. Did you just laugh at me? 1972.
63.
Yeah, I knew I was way off that first one.
Way off.
Movie pop quiz time. What other film did Leonardo DiCaprio and Mark Wahlberg star in? Together.
Basketball Diaries.
Yes.
I almost blanked on that. Almost. Good one. All right, here's my quiz question. What famous show did Martin Sheen star in?
Martin Steen.
I read it without my glasses on. Martin Sheen, what show?
Oh, this is a early Aaron Sorkin project. He wrote this.
It is an Aaron Sorkin project.
West Wing.
The West Wing's correct.
He's the president.
Our mom watched it all the time.
Is that like the first show he ever wrote? It might
Aaron
be.
Sorkin, I believe that's what he started with. It was the West Wing.
Yeah, Mom loved that. What's
He
next?
invented the walk and talk.
Did he really?
Yeah, the walk and talk was basically
As a director or
as a writer.
as a writing?
Yeah,
All
as
right.
a technique, as just having characters walking through the hallways. Because in that show, I mean, it's just people talking, so they had to keep it visually interesting. So like, let's just have them walk through the hallways while they talk.
Mhm.
So that was where walk and talk came from.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Not that it had never been done before, but like
That's where it like became
a
a
super
thing.
well-known thing.
Yeah.
All right, next up, who do we got for haters this week, Anthony? Any haters?
We got a couple of haters. So we just filmed yesterday, so I went through a ton of haters. I should, you know what I should do? When we film back to back, I should save some.
Yeah, save
for
a few,
both.
man.
I knew you were gonna say it like that.
Say like what?
You're so predictable with your sarcasm.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But we got Resalt 665, another class episode, boys, talking about our Scorsese episode. Thanks for the shout out on the baseball movie episode, but Rice Scott, who the fuck is that guy, unsubscribed. Nah, for real. Big love. Keep killing it, boys. I think that was some UK slang there. I didn't quite get that. Sorry, but. And then.
No, Rice Scott?
Yeah.
No, you said someone's name as Rice Scott.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, I can't remember who it was, but you said like Rice Scott for a name, and I called you out on it.
Did I mean Ridley Scott?
I think so,
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. Okay, that makes sense.
I think that's what it was.
All right. Chris Colin, 956. No Cornetto or Beverly Hills Cop trilogies. I subscribed.
Cornetto trilogy is not really a trilogy.
And then Beverly Hills Cop, third one, very good. So we couldn't put that in.
We have a great 5-star review.
Let's hear it.
From Barry Flynn. Best podcast of the century.
Whoa.
These guys are simply brilliant. I haven't been listening to them for too long, but I think the Batman trailer reaction was my first episode. But I've not missed an episode since then, and even went back to listen to all the ones I missed. These fellows also do their research on the things they are talking about, so you know they are wicked smart.
Wicked smart.
Perfect choice for this episode. Can't recommend them enough, and can't thank them enough for putting me on Top Gun Maverick.
Oh, yeah, baby.
Tom's right behind me. He'll always be there.
He'll always be watching you.
It's the only guy I want standing behind me at all times.
Where do you want him behind you?
Just right there. Right over my shoulder.
Right behind you. Get in there, dog. Get in there, dog.
You in there, dog?
Get in there, dog.
You in there? Yeah, you in there?
It's a Key and Peele sketch we keep referencing. It's a great one. It's the hat one.
No, it's the Obama one.
No, it's the hat one.
I thought it was the Obama one where it's Obama's like saying hi to everybody. And depending on if they're white or black, he like daps them up or just gives them a handshake.
Well, no, yeah, that's that sketch.
He even shakes the baby's hand.
Yeah, that's that.
Hello, baby. Nice to meet you.
You're mixing it up with the hat one where, so they live in the same neighborhood, and then Keegan goes out to see to go see Peele, and then Peele has this really great new era hat with like this tag on,
yeah,
and sticker on, and
they go back
keep
and forth.
one-upping each other. But the second time that Peele shows up with a new hat and it's like really intense, then they hug and they dap and they hug, and then that's when they get in there, dog. Get in there, dog.
I think you're wrong.
I'm
pretty sure because this is.
I just watched it 3 days ago. I'm 100% right.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
But do they do it twice?
They do the get in there, dog?
Yeah.
They do that once.
I thought it was also in that Obama sketch, and then Keegan's there, and Obama as Peele's Obama, he turns to his advisor and he's like, what about him? He's like, 1/8 black. Then he goes, hey, what's up in there? You in there? You in there, dog? You in there, dog? I'm in there,
Does
dog.
he?
Yeah, I'm pretty damn sure.
Maybe.
So then it's the Obama sketch as well.
Uh-huh.
Because
I'll have to watch the Obama one.
Because he gets confirmation that Keegan's black too. Because it's like he shakes the babies. Like everyone who's white, just like, hello, sir, nice to meet you, nice to meet you. Oh, come on in there.
I love the group of people. They're like, oh.
But I'm telling you, he does it with Keegan in that one.
Yeah,
too.
they might. You have to double check that.
Get in there, dog.
Get in there, dog.
Get in there, dog. Anyways,
I love that show.
dude, I'm so glad they put it on Netflix.
I think it's the best sketch comedy show of all time.
it might be in terms of like how much they did over
How much
those
of it's good
several
too.
years.
Like just the sheer number of amazing sketches they have is just it's
bonkers.
insane.
It's bonkers, man.
And they're both great comedic actors. They are amazing. And Peele just like it transforms into his roles. It's unbelievable.
I want to see real quick how many. I wonder if Jordan Peele was directing episodes of that or sketches, and that's how he got his basis of directing.
Well, they were
before
show running, like showrunners would. I believe they hired directors out for each episode, but they were overseeing the whole thing. And it wasn't until the last season where, so they were modestly budgeted every season, but then the 6th season, I think is the last season, then they were like, this is our last season, let's put a lot of money into it, and also let's put a lot of care into the filmmaking of it. And then the last season it's like the best looking season, the best made season.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He never directed any episodes of Key and Peele,
But he was a showrunner.
producer, showrunner,
Yeah.
and then producer of Keanu. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to our my streaming recommendation for this episode is gonna be Hugo, which is on HBO Max right now. This is a magical film. We talked about it.
Isn't it really funny?
Yeah, it's really funny as well. We talked about it in our director spotlight of Scorsese last week, and it's terrific. It's so underrated. No one really talks about this movie whenever they bring up Marty's movies, whenever people make a Marty list. It's potentially a top 5 movie in his filmography. Potentially,
it's very good.
It's really, really well made. And James Cameron called it the best 3D shot film ever made, even like better than his Avatar movie, I would say. I think he said about, because what Scorsese did was just exceptional. And I didn't watch it in 3D. I watched it in 2D when I saw it. But I really would like to see it in 3D. But it's really beautiful, incredible production design, great childhood performances. Chloe Grace Moretz is pretty young in it. Asa Butterfield as well. Ben Kingsley is in this. Helen
Sacha
McCrory. Sacha Baron Cohen. So the cast is phenomenal. Really, really great movie. Very funny, family friendly.
Beautiful.
Highly recommend it. Yeah.
Beautiful. It won the Oscar for cinematography
It's
and
gorgeous.
for editing.
It really is.
It's just like we were talking about it last week. Just that you don't see craftsmanship like that in children's films generally. It's very
That shows
rare.
you how good of a director Martin Scorsese is.
To make a kids movie that wins Oscars for craftsmanship, like it's just unbelievable. Fun fact about that: what's her name? Chloe Grace Moretz. She actually tricked Scorsese into thinking that she was British.
Oh, she has a great accent in it.
So she went to the audition pretending to be British, and she came up with a fake backstory of where she was from, what her family was like, because she didn't want them to think that she was American. And she's like 13 when she did this. And she fooled them, and they loved her audition, so they cast her. And then halfway through production, she was just speaking in her normal American accent on set. And then Scorsese was nearby, and he goes, "That's a really good American accent." And she goes, "Yeah, so I'm actually from Georgia."
That's so funny.
She said he got a kick out of it.
That's
Thought it was
savage.
Really, thought it was really. But to be like 13 years old and pull that, man.
It's clever too,
Yeah.
because most casting directors wouldn't cast an American actor to play British characters.
But once you have that in the back of their head, they wouldn't. They're judging your British accent.
Yeah.
Whereas if you tell them they're British, they're like, oh, they'll just accept your British accent completely.
Because there's something about Americans doing British accent where it's really tough to pull off.
But also, if you have that in the back of your head, like this person's American trying to do British, you're thinking about that.
Yeah.
Whereas if they present themselves as British, you're not thinking about that.
That's what a great anecdote.
Your anecdotes are out of control. Everybody knows that. Sick anecdote, bro.
Really, really, I really enjoyed that, Anthony. Thank you. How about we get back into the Departed episode?
We didn't do our Maestro rec.
Oh, you're sure? They don't even care. What is it?
War Horse on HBO Max, because Fabelmans is out now, but I think this is a movie of his that's really terrific that not many people have seen. It's really great.
Great pick.
It's a beautiful story.
It's a really good movie. All right, now can we head back into their episode on the end? On the
Thank you for
Departed?
letting me get my stream reckon.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. Now, how about we talk a little bit about Frank Costello, played by Jack Nicholson.
Jack is one of my favorite actors, and at this point of his career, he was doing a lot of comedy dramedies, like As Good as It Gets.
About Schmidt.
About Schmidt. As Good as It Gets is great, though.
It's a good movie.
It's great. I love that movie.
For a rom-com, it's terrific.
Yeah, and a few others that were just like more like tame in terms of characters.
The Adam Sandler one, the New York one.
Anger Management. I think he was just, taking it easy, making money. I'm old. Let me just enjoy what I'm doing.
Wow, that's so mean.
Hey, nothing wrong with that, man. Can make 20 mil a movie. Why not?
These Laker floor seats are expensive.
Exactly. Lots of nachos to eat, bro. By the way, I love the photos of him at Lakers games eating
food.
But with this movie, he proved once again why he's the greatest actors to ever live. And
One of the greatest actors ever lived.
yeah, Scorsese originally he wanted Al Pacino for this role, and I think Al Pacino. I think it's arguable that he's the greatest actor of all time, but I don't think Al Pacino could have done what Jack Nicholson did in this film. And we talked about this in our Scorsese episode, but Jack did a lot of improvising in this movie. The clothing is the first indication of his improvisation, just having like the leopard print tie, the bathrobes, things like that, just like character idiosyncrasies and eccentricities that only he would have. The dildo was his idea, the dildo in the porno theater.
I feel like he wore a purple suit because of the Joker playing the Joker as well.
Maybe.
He's got like a light purple suit
Yeah,
in
it
the rat scene.
could have been a callback to that. But the opera scene was actually his idea. That wasn't in the script. He said, I want to be at the opera with 2 women, 2 escorts. And then Scorsese's like, yeah, sounds good, man. Let's do it. The first scene of him killing, where he kills the couple on the beach, I talked about in the Scorsese episode how he told Marty, the scene was written as him killing a couple of gangsters. It was going to be a couple of Providence Italians. But he told them, what if you make it a man and a woman? And then and then he said, if you keep the camera rolling, if I shoot her, I could say she felt funny. And then if you keep the camera rolling and cut and show the wide shot, then you see that Frenchie's holding an axe. And then he says, Frank, you really should see someone. Those were Jack's ideas, amongst, I'm sure, many other things. I think that the sketch of the mice, like the mice kingdom that he drew on the table, I believe that Jack drew that. If he didn't, it was definitely his idea. Obviously, using the pistol, hiding the pistol underneath the table that he drops when he's talking to Costigan, another of Jack's ideas. Those are probably just the most famous ones, but I'm sure the film is laced with even more of what Jack Nicholson brought to the character. It is really just an exceptional performance. One of the greatest villains in film history that nobody ever puts on lists of greatest villains of all time. I just love the performance. He really makes the movie excel because when you have a great antagonist like this, it only makes your movie better. But I think the most important scene to really show how terrible this human being is when Costigan is finally at Frank's home at his apartment, and then they seem to be having like a normal breakfast conversation, and then Frank just pulls out a Ziploc bag with a man's cut off hand in it, and he pulls off the ring of this bloodied hand, and then he continues eating
Lobster.
Yeah, continues eating lobster with this man's blood all over his hands. Like, what a great depiction of what this person is, just in one scene.
He's highly intelligent, obviously, as well, just like Costigan and Sullivan are. That's why he's really drawn to them, and they're both become protégés of him. Colin's maybe his greatest project in his entire life.
His golden goose, in a way.
Yeah, and Costigan, once he starts taking him under his wing, he even asks him, have you ever thought about going back to school? And no offense, Mr. Costello, school is out. Well, maybe you'll wake the fuck up. So clearly he had intentions with Costigan to maybe go back to school because he's still young and he's clearly intelligent. And Frank is so out of his mind, and the unpredictability of the characters is so fascinating. I didn't know that he came up with the opera scene idea.
Yeah.
And I love, obviously, Scorsese shot it in red. This is an evil character, red lighting. And that's probably, I think, Frank, it's probably a really good idea because you don't really see many villains and their sexuality in films, like maybe like evil villainous characters. That's usually like glossed over versus like seeing what they're like in that kind of situation. And obviously he's got a messed up sexual life as well. He's just got piles of cocaine everywhere that he's throwing into the ceiling. It's wild. So I think that's probably a really interesting thing that he'd probably never seen before that he wanted to add in there. But Frank Costello has taken over the entire city in this area of Boston from maybe you could assume was once a petty criminal rising up the ranks. Then, he says that great line to Costigan when he's talking about the rat. He's like, a lot of people had to die for me to be me. So you can only assume that he's killed hundreds of people, thousands maybe.
Fast day situations like this kill everybody.
So it's taken a lot to get to where he is. And he almost seems kind of bored with his life. And that's why he's like so crazy with his extravagance and what he does on a day-to-day basis. And
well, he's always been bored. He hasn't needed the money since he stole Archie's milk money in elementary school. He just does things because he likes it. And so he just takes. He's a taker. He just lives in excess and just loves drugs and money, power, food, entertainment, everything. He lives life to the fullest. He's extreme, bro.
He's extreme. And he's played the system so well that he even has the FBI in his pocket, and he's protected because he's an FBI informant. And Costigan's the first one to learn this, and then Sullivan eventually learns it as well. And this is why he's been so protected from federal investigations. Every time a case is brought up, it gets thrown out because he gives people up to the rat. He says he he only gives people up that weren't going down anyways, but he
That
still
were
gives
going
people
down,
up.
yeah.
And you can only assume, like we said earlier, that he's probably going to give Colin up at some point as well. But Frank, like I said, he's very intelligent, but also very erratic. He has a lot of great nuggets of I would say wisdom in this film, as well as insanity. But they're kind of just like he's on this great balance where he's back and forth between the two of them. You know, he's obviously insane walking around his bar covered in blood, but he's also clever of how he thinks he's gonna find the rat in his organization. But he's also really ignorant because the rat's right in front of him this whole entire time. It's the new guy, it's Costigan, but because loyalty is the only thing that really has kept him alive this long, you could assume. That's why he eventually trusts Costigan when Costigan outsmarts him multiple times. But it also makes me wonder why he didn't trust Frenchie enough with the information, with the tapes and everything, with the evidence that he had backlogged. Why did he trust Costigan over Frenchie? I wonder because, you know, he trusted Uncle Jackie. He trusted Frenchie. They were the only...
They were reliable.
They were reliable. Costigan clearly to him was a reliable guy as well. But why did he trust Costigan over Frenchie? Maybe because of Uncle Jackie, maybe because he respected Costigan's father a lot.
I think that, but also, like I said earlier, the connection he makes with Costigan, what's the difference? I think that also he looks at Costigan as kind of like a pseudo-son in a way, and him being like a pseudo-father to him, which is why he talks to him about going back to school and stuff like that. I think he looks at him like he could be the son he never had. Even though he says that to Colin, I don't think he ever really felt like that towards Colin. But with Bill, he did. So I would say it's because he feels a kinship with him.
All that killing and fucking and no sons. And maybe he respects Costigan because Costigan stands up to Frank multiple times. You know, he threatens Frank before Frank pulls the gun out on him in the rat sequence. But he does threaten Frank where, you know, you make me fear for my life and I'll put a bullet through your head. And he doesn't stay at the hideout when Costello's getting everybody's numbers, all your bank accounts, your license plate, all your numbers. Why didn't you stay at the bar when I was getting everybody's numbers? You see, Bill, you're the new guy. So I think maybe also Costigan standing up to him multiple times gave Frank a lot of respect for him.
And I think that Costigan making Frank realize that the person who was going to kill him or take him out would be someone who thinks that they could do his job better than he can. That's something he never considered before. I think that was a really big step for Costigan to bring to light for Costello, making him realize, like, you know what, maybe one of these guys, they've been here with me for so long, maybe they want what I have, and I'm at risk around them. So I think that was a really major play by Costigan to bring that up.
He's super ironic character, too, because all he cares about is rats, and he hates rats. He just wants to find rats, and he's the biggest rat of them all, which is really ironic and
Great
interesting.
irony, yeah.
And there's another rat in this movie, obviously Barrigan, and we don't find out he's a rat until he kills Costigan, saves Sullivan in the elevator, and you know he's the cop that Sullivan helped get a leg up in the Massachusetts State Police Department. And Marty is such a great filmmaker. This movie, I think it goes over a lot of people's heads how creative it is and the metaphors that Marty did with his cinematography and his edits. And I was rewatching it. I paused it multiple times because my mind was blown by some of these edits that he did, hinting at Barrigan specifically of being a rat.
Everything's by design.
Yeah, and so there's so many pieces of dialogue where Sullivan gets a promotion. He's talking to Anthony Anderson's character, and then Barrigan, Al Baldwin's character, thinks that there's a rat in SIU, and the camera immediately cuts to Barrigan's character. There's a few instances where a rat's brought up, and we cut to Barrigan. It's a close-up, and he like looks down and like is trying to avoid eye contact with people.
And he's also standing right behind Sullivan in the initiation ceremony. Scorsese purposely puts him right there for the audience to see front and center, right behind Sullivan.
And I think maybe my best shot in this entire movie, it's a great pan, where right before, when Fitz is in the interrogation room, and it's just a great cut. The scene opens up of the security camera of Fitz sitting there by himself and alone. And Sullivan and his two guys, Barrigan and then Anthony Anderson's character, I can't remember his name, they're talking, and they're like, yeah, he hasn't called a lawyer or anything. He's like, he doesn't know what the lawyer looks like. I'm going to go in there. He shut the camera off. So he shuts the camera off. But before they're talking about that, there's a pan from the security camera or of the characters, and the camera pans from that to the double-sided glass where obviously Fitz can't see through, but they can see Fitz. And Fitz is right there in the glass in the center of it, and there's a reflection of Barrigan right next to Fitz's face, revealing obviously that Barrigan is a part of this organization. He is a rat. There are two great shots of Barrigan's reflection in the glass with Fitz. It's beautiful. It's subtle. It's nuanced. It's so creative. It's just masterful directing that I think so many people don't pick up on stuff like this in Scorsese's movies. They think like, oh, what's so great about Scorsese? It's like stuff like this. It's incredible. It's genius level directing.
It's all done with intention too. It's all intention.
Blew my mind. I never really picked up on it. And then I paused. I'm like, Anthony, look at this shot. Look at this pan.
I was like, I know, man. There's a reason why I think he's the greatest director of all time. And the more you watch his movies, and you have to watch great filmmakers' movies over and over again to really see what they're doing and really see how they're approaching the craft. And I gotta tell you, I've seen Scorsese movies enough, and many other filmmakers enough times, but with Scorsese, the more times I watch his films, the more I've realized that he is the greatest filmmaker of all time. And that's just one example of why, you know what I mean? He just put so much into it. Any other filmmaker would, they shoot the scene so in just like a very formulaic way, without the meaning behind it, but he always has incredible motivation behind the camera and why he's showing you something. It's not all by accident. It's not just for no reason with someone like him.
And it's stuff that you don't see on first viewings. It's stuff because you're meant to rewatch the movie and pick up on new things like that all over again. It's just like we brought up in the Scorsese spotlight when Bong Joon-ho won Best Director for Parasite. He thanked Martin Scorsese in his filmography and in his movies for basically being in the position he is. And you can see Bong Joon-ho is a filmmaker that emulates his style off of Scorsese. It looks a little different. Obviously, his style is his own. He's a lot more like surgical in his precision with
shoots
filmmaking.
Much wider too.
But I mean, in terms of like his sets and his layers, I think he's a lot more surgical. But when you talk about Parasite, we did an episode on it, things like the chairs that are just showing up in the dining room to show how many people are actually in the house, the empty chairs, things like that are subtle things that a lot of filmmakers don't think about doing. But, I think Bong Joon-ho follows in the footsteps of Martin Scorsese of subliminal messages throughout his entire film, revealing secrets of the movie and foreshadowing events.
Yeah, and it's just like he's not saying, hey, this guy's the rat. He just wants you to get a sense about this character that you don't even know you got a sense of. But just something's off, and he wants you to know that. And, I mean, it leads to that friggin' finale, which every time I watch it, I don't know how many times I've seen it, but still, the elevator scene
devastates me every time.
It's unbelievable every time I watch it. It's one of the best deaths ever portrayed in a movie. And, oh, my God. And it just becomes a bloodbath, and it really lives up to the name of the film, The Departed. But to have all this build-up, especially with Costigan's character, and for him to finally catch Sullivan, he's finally got the rat. He's finally got Costello's guy.
What is this, a citizen's arrest?
Blow me. He's finally going to bring him in. And by the way, I love the elevator sequence when it's just DiCaprio and Damon because they're so great. And I love how at first Sullivan's like, I can't wait to see you explain this to a fucking Suffolk County jury. This is going to be fucking fun. And then he sees the elevator go down just one level, completely on a dime, turns to just fucking kill me. All he needs to see is the level change from 5 to 4, and he's already gone from arrogant cockiness to just kill me. I don't want to live through this. It's going to be horrible for me. It's an amazing moment in the film. It's such great character work. But then for the door to open up, the audience is just like, oh, I can't wait for him to bring him in. But bam! Gunshot wound right to the head. His brains are on the wall, and then Costigan just collapses onto the floor. Oh my God. The first time I saw that, I was in shock. It's one of the most surprising moments I've ever seen in a movie.
It's really incredible. And when I was watching this in theaters when it came out, I was devastated in this moment. And I know a lot of people that hate this point in the movie. They don't like The Departed because of the scene. Because it just breaks their heart too much.
It's because they love Leo.
Yeah, you love Leo. You love Costigan. You're rooting for him the whole time. He's going to get together with Madeline. Madeline was going to confess something to him, but he said, if you want to tell me in 2 weeks, you can tell me in 2 weeks. And he's gone. He's dead forever after everything he'd gone through. And Sullivan, to his credit as being a horrible villain, he's able to spin every scenario he's in to his benefit and kind of just rise above it in a lot of ways professionally. He's able to explain his way out of it. He even peppers in the Medal of Merit for Costigan because, this is prefaced with the sequence of Costigan coming in. After Sullivan takes down Costello, Costigan comes in. He's going to get paid. He's going to get his identity back. Hold on, give me a minute, Bill. My computer's getting all bluey on me. I got to go run this in the other room. And, he sees the envelope that has the citizens written on it. It says citizens. I don't know how to spell citizens.
Can you believe this? Citizens.
You fucking kidding me? And at that moment, you think that obviously the rats are looking at each other in the face in the desk and in that office. Maybe Costigan will get away and he'll have his life back. And obviously, clearly, Sullivan's probably going to get away with everything. It's kind of a win-win, lose-lose for everybody. And then Costigan, you can say it's probably not the best decision. If you're in his shoes, you obviously, hindsight, you'd be like, I should act this out, get my identity back, and then leave. But if you're in his shoes, you're like, I gotta get the hell out of this building. I don't want to die. Mm-hmm. I've been undercover for a year and a half, and I just got to get out of here. This is the rat. I got to figure out a way to take him down. And it's just such a loss. And like I grieved for him for like a few minutes.
What a loss!
It is a huge loss to the film, which is why it's so good. It means so much. That's why it hurts so much to watch Costigan die. It hurts,
and also to have a star of his caliber, and a star of his magnitude, DiCaprio, because obviously in Titanic he died, but that's what catapulted him to fame. You weren't expecting the most famous actor alive to die in his movie. So I also think that was just really brilliant. To kill the most famous person on the planet in your movie was just like so unexpected.
20 minutes before the end of the movie, too.
Yeah.
It's ballsy.
Nobody saw it coming.
And like you said, not even just Costigan getting killed, but the scene is so intense. It's so memorable. It really seals this movie as being a borderline masterpiece and one of the best films of that decade, of the 2000s, because so many stakes go on. And it's just like these 4 headshots in this little elevator setting, so powerful.
And he shoots it just with one wide frame. The whole thing. It's just he puts the camera like on the ground, and we're kind of looking up, and it's just the whole scene takes place. There's not a bunch of edits, not a bunch of cuts. He lets it play out, and it's really powerful.
It's intense. And even before that, there's the great sequence of the raid on Costello. And like we said earlier, Sullivan, he was waiting for an opportunity to take Costello out, especially after he found out that Frank was an FBI informant. You're a fucking FBI informant? Are you fucking kidding me? And he sets up the raid where I think it's like the last straw he's had with Frank, where Frank yells at him, get rid of the tail. Just get rid of the tail. And
he's like, you're going down.
Sullivan's like, all right, you want me to get rid of the tail? Calls it back, gives the destination and location of Costello to Alec Baldwin's character, sets up SWAT and tactical, and they take Costello out. Now Sullivan is a hero. He takes Costello out himself. He's not sure if Frank told anybody about him. He's guessing no, because no one's talked to him, no one's brought it up, no one's come after him yet. So he thinks he's won, and he's taken Frank out, and he's saved his reputation as well as being a spectacular police officer and detective in the Massachusetts State Police Departments. So he thinks he won. He even thinks he won again after Costigan gets taken out by Barrigan, after he kills Barrigan, and it's just a bloodbath. He thinks he's won again, but of course, our boy Dignam is waiting for him in his apartment later.
And if you're gonna kill someone, I mean, being a cop, he's got the perfect wardrobe on. He's got
You should have had the hat on first, though.
Yeah, that's true. But he gotta show his hair.
Yeah, show Mark.
Yeah, but he's got the sweatsuits. He's got the sweatsuit on, and then he's got the coverings over his shoes, and then the gloves, silenced pistol, and then he puts the hat on when he leaves the room, and he takes the gloves off to avoid suspicion. So that way, he's kind of like just passes by without being without taking notice. So it's the perfect way to kill someone in a way.
Yeah. It's tragic how Queenan dies too, because I think Dignam and Queenan are one of my favorite parts of this movie. They have great chemistry, even though they're polar opposites in the way they approach their job, but they genuinely care about making a difference in their community, and they run the undercover apartment at SIU, Special Investigations Unit, SIU.
Yeah.
But they run the undercovers. And specifically, Queenan really takes Costigan under his wing. Dignam's more of an asshole, a ball buster. He doesn't really care about Costigan that much.
But he's an asshole to everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Except for
Queenan,
Queenan.
Yeah.
And I really love their relationship. I love their interactions with Costigan. I think one of my favorite scenes is also when Costigan and him get into that fist fight, and before they go into the car to bring up the microprocessors, and Costigan's like, I can't wear a wire anymore. This is crazy. I'm losing my mind. And the death of Queenan is also really tragic as well, because you grow to love that guy, and he's Costigan's really only father figure left. He takes him into his home and gives him supper, and they talk about what he learned about Costello being an FBI informant. And you can tell that Queenan really did care about him, because he's like, I'm going to try to get you out. And they meet up on the rooftop. I'm going to do what I can. I can't do it overnight, but I care about you, and you're clearly unwell, and you're in danger, so I'm going to get you out of undercover. It's going to happen. And unfortunately, Sullivan knew that Queenan, he was trying to find out who the rat was, so he was tailing Queenan. And, the shootout happened after Queenan, then before that, obviously, Queenan got thrown off the roof. So he sacrificed himself to save Costigan. He knew he was going to die.
Where's your boy?
He knew he wasn't going to get out of that situation alive, but he sacrificed himself so Costigan can get away, which is really noble, but tragic as well.
And that fall, man, oh my God. And then it cuts to Leo walking, and then just the body falls right in front of him. The blood sprays. Oh, man.
It's brilliant filmmaking.
Yeah.
The body's falling with just silence, except you hear the seagulls in the distance in the background of the bay. It's really brilliant. And obviously, the X's of this film are all over the place.
X's.
X marks the spot. X's are peppered everywhere, whether it's in the background, it's a cage, it's a fence, it's paint on a wall, it's lighting. The X's mark characters who are going to die throughout the course of this entire film. Next time you watch it, you're going to see X's all over the goddamn
place. There's a lot of them.
Starting in the opening of the movie. They're all over the place, and it's brilliant filmmaking. I can't remember what movie he's calling back to. Is it Scarface, the original one?
Scarface, Howard Hughes' Scarface.
I love that, and it's so prevalent in the production design. Even the carpeting right before Colin Sullivan gets killed by Dignam, the carpeting in the hallway is a big red X right before he opens the door. So there's so many great production elements of this film that just go over so many people's heads unless they read about it on like a movie fact on Instagram.
I definitely did not. I also love the opening with Frank Costello's introduction, where he's in darkness for his first few sequences, in the first few shots of him, even in the convenience store, he's in the dark, and you really can't make out his face, really. Obviously it's Jack Nicholson, but they purposely light him in a way where there's no actual lights like pouring onto his face, and then he finally reveals himself when he walks up to the kids in the mechanic shop and says, "What's the difference?" I love how he is shrouded in darkness for the first 10 minutes of the movie, though. It's really terrific.
And the convenience store shot in the opening is really great because it's bookended later on in the movie with the convenience store, the same exact diner convenience store that Costigan beats up the two Italian guys from Providence in. Same exact store. It's really great.
And also, what happens in the opening of the movie with Frank and Colin? Buys him groceries.
The groceries, same exact groceries.
And then Colin is walking into his apartment with the bag of groceries before he's killed.
And the groceries are identical, where it's loaves of bread, milk, and magazine, and comic books. In the beginning of the movie with Colin as a kid, when he dies, it's the French donuts, the croissants, which he picked up from Madeline, obviously, because she used to get them for them, as well as milk, and dead.
Yeah. It's really terrific bookend for the character. And it showed how he's evolved in terms of his taste and social class based upon what he's buying at the grocery store, but also a connection to when his career as a criminal started, and then his career as a criminal ended with his death.
Yeah, there's a few other scenes I really want to talk about. Oh, well, of course, with the ending, too, with the great rat shot in front of the Golden Dome. Which
terrific.
So many people hate that.
I know. That gets a lot of hate online. It's like, obvious. It's so, like, English teachers be like...
Yeah, English teachers be like...
Bro, it's a movie.
It's one of the main themes of the film.
Yeah.
Some of my other favorite scenes in this movie.
I think it's funny. I crack up when I see it.
It's great. I love the chase sequence between Leo and Damon. So Colin and...
In the alleys?
Costigan and Sullivan in the alleys after the adult movie theater, where Costigan's in communication with Queenan, trying to ID the undercover mole that Costello is meeting with through that alleyway. Just terrific music and build up with Howard Shore and suspense going through that alley. We talked about it in the Scorsese Spotlight, the scene specifically.
Great editing too,
and terrific editing, great cinematography, and the lighting, the reds, the blues, the different cultures. What I really liked about this movie is they show a lot of Chinatown in this movie, because it's a really diverse and rich part of Boston for sure. Chinatown's great, and it shows the desperation between the two characters, and I think it's great editing as well. I mean, unfortunately, Sullivan knives some random guy in the stomach in the alleyway. But the editing's terrific, where the scene ends with Costigan going out into the street, looking around for the rat, the mole, trying to see who it is, and it cuts to the security camera footage that Sullivan is accessing at MSP, Massachusetts State Police. Yeah, MSP. And it's just a really grainy, low quality.
Enhance that.
My God, it's Jason Bourne, and he can't tell who it is. And I think it's just a great edit and a great sequence.
Well, they both had the same instance, so Sullivan can barely make out. He can't make out who that is, and then also Costigan couldn't make out who Colin was, just for that one instance where he was turning, and then someone walked in front of him and blocked his face. So they both had that instance. Also, this movie is really funny. It is hysterical. The cast is really talented with their comedic deliveries of lines, and I find it gut busting at times. It's really entertaining and hysterical.
Yeah, I think the secret raid that Sullivan didn't know about.
Yeah.
So many funny moments, specifically with the camera guy and Dignam. Who set the cameras up in this place? Oh yeah, who are you? I'm the guy who does his job. You must be the other guy. So many great lines. Alec Baldwin is a scene stealer. So many great lines as well. Dignam, I think, is the funniest of all. But that's a great sequence as well too. I think. Sullivan,
flip phones,
the T9 texting in the pocket,
so many flip phones in this movie.
Yeah, the Samsung Nokia flip phones are all over the place.
And I will say that is doable because that phone he's only using that phone for texting with Frank, so it's the only contact in his phone for that one. So it makes sense that he'd be able to do that without looking at it because T9 you can text without looking, and he would probably, being so good at what he does, he would know how to open up a text without looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
But also keep in mind that phone only has one contact in it, so it's easier.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like when I was younger with the flip phone, I was able to do it like barely looking at it.
Yeah.
It's just 3 letters.
I remember, even when I just had one a few years ago, you could text and drive without even looking down. You could just completely keep your attention on the road and text while driving.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would never text and drive. It's bad.
Also, why does Costello accept Costigan into his crew so quickly? I think obviously Costigan effectively proved himself to be a potentially valuable member to his crew. You know, standing up for people in his community when he took out the Italians at that shop that is part of South Boston, as well as proving himself at the bar by beating up the guy who made fun of him about the cranberry juice, even though Frenchie makes fun of him about it as well. But then also not having any contraband on him, and being related to his Uncle Jackie as well as his father. I think those are all reasons why Costello was willing to accept him so quickly.
And also, you can imagine he did spend a lot of time in prison. It's not said how much time he spent, but when you're cross-cutting with Sullivan's rise, it does take some time to rise that far in the ranks of the law enforcement. So you're talking about, it could have been a couple of years he served in prison.
It's possible. It's possible because he says he's been undercover for over a year.
Yeah.
So
I would say when he says I've been undercover for over a year, that's when he became an undercover criminal. But serving time, I don't think that counted.
But technically, he's undercover the whole time.
Yeah, I suppose so.
I would say it's probably he said something about 4 months, but I think he said that's when I got out. I got out 4 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Got out of prison.
I think the way I look at it, I think he was in prison for maybe 2 years.
Maybe it's possible.
Yeah.
They don't really say if you don't consider that being part of undercover.
But when you look at how it's cut with Sullivan graduating, and then he's a detective, that takes time, you know?
Sure, true. Some other things I want to talk about. I want to go back to the editing and the cross-cutting because I just remembered a scene where I was trying to articulate that I did a very poor job of earlier, showing the great editing and cross-cutting of sequences. There's a great scene where Costello's talking. I think he's talking to Frenchie, and then we're getting cross-cut close-up shots of the Italians that were killed that are just bloodied on the ground. And it's going back and forth between these still shots of them as well as Frank laughing with Frenchie and then singing, cross-cutting back to the Providence guys, back and forth while Frank's doing voiceover and talking. And then it cuts to Sullivan. The principles of detection tell me that these two gentlemen are from Providence. And then it turns into Sullivan's scene, and Sullivan kind of takes the story on a little further because this movie just goes back and forth of Frank pushing the story, Costigan pushing the story, and then Sullivan pushing the story. And I think they do a really good job of balancing all three of them.
Seamless editing. And it's basically one sequence if you think about it.
That's why I brought it up. It's just one cross-cutting sequence.
And Ray Winstone's terrific.
Yeah.
I think this was the first thing I'd seen him in, and he just like really stands out as the number one. And I like how he still has his UK accent. It's a little off, with a little bit Americanized, but it's still there. Because I like that. I think that it really works for, being a Boston gangster. There would be a couple that would be like originally from the UK.
Yeah, and from Ireland, because Fitz's actor, that actor's from Ireland as well.
Yeah.
He's in what's that movie called? James McAvoy, Wanted?
Wanted, yeah.
Yeah, Wanted.
Yeah.
Chris Pratt's like early movie role.
Oh yeah, he plays the bully at the office. He gets punched out with the keyboard.
But I mean, do you have anything else to talk about?
I got some fun facts.
Yeah, let's go with some fun facts.
Roughly half of the $90 million budget went to the actors' salaries. Martin Scorsese originally wanted The Departed to be a small independent film, but as they kept casting more movie stars, they had to increase the budget. So Warner Brothers really ballooned the budget for the film.
Oh, can I bring up one more talking point?
Yeah.
The use of silence. We talked about this in Scorsese's Director Spotlight.
Oh, yeah.
His brilliant use of using silence to build suspense, to draw out a scene and show a character's emotionality. I think it's used so effectively in this movie. I think the two best examples are number one being the phone call when Colin calls Costigan on Queenan's phone and no one says anything and they're just both dead silent, listening on the other end. Couple close-up shots of each of them. Beautiful scene, brilliant, so much suspense building. And I think the second best time is after the shootout outside of 344 Washington Street when the guys are calling out for backup and for an ambulance because an officer's been shot by Costello's crew. And then Sullivan is just listening. He shuts off the radio, turns off the lights in his office, and he just sits there for about 10 to 15 seconds in silence.
Yeah.
Just taking it all in.
Also, the phone call when Costigan decides to call back, Scorsese and Schoonmaker, they speed up the footage, and DiCaprio rushes to the table. That's sped up, and this crazy pounding sound effect appears. That's just a great technique to build this propulsive suspense in that moment. I think it's just great old filmmaking style.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, I think we're good. Other than that, the only other thing I would bring up is Colin. We were talking about how he was planning to get away. He wanted to go to law school. He wanted to move out of Boston.
Yeah, he wanted to build his own life.
Yeah.
He wanted to build his own life, and Frank didn't want that to happen. Okay. Matt Damon actually decided his character should be impotent to counter Frank's macho personality. Ironically, both of them are. Because if you look, Gwen, she's actually in one of the shots in their apartment. She's reading a book on how to get pregnant.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if you look at the book, it says how to get pregnant.
Mm.
So Frank's having trouble with that too in that department. Next up, originally, Ray Liotta was the choice for the role of Dignam, but he had to reluctantly decline due to other commitments with his schedule.
It's too bad.
So that was his first choice for that character. The F word and its derivatives are used 238 times in The Departed.
They edited some of it out on the HBO Max version.
Really?
Some of them are cut out.
Yeah, I think you might be right.
They're changed there's a line where Gwen clearly says on the phone to Colin or someone, she says, "Where the fuck is Frank?" But then it's been edited to "Where the heck is Frank?"
What's the difference? It's already said 100,
I'm sure
200
the DVD
times.
versions, it's all set.
Dennis Leary was actually offered the role of Dignam in this film, but he turned it down due to scheduling conflicts with his show Rescue Me. He was very disappointed he could not act in the film, but he did hold Mark Wahlberg's performance in high regard. I think he could have been a really good Dignam.
Yeah.
He could have pulled it off.
Yeah, I agree.
The comic book that Frank Costello gives a young Colin Sullivan in the beginning of the movie is the issue number 11 of the Wolverine series, which was published in September 1989.
Cool.
I love this movie. I think it's really deserving of all the praise it got, of all its ratings, of its awards. It is a testament and example of the brilliance of Martin Scorsese, as well as the extremely talented cast and crew. It's an extremely authentic and accurate depiction of the culture of Boston. All the performers and cast and crew did a remarkable job with this film. I love it.
It's one of those movies where, we talked about Scorsese every decade. He made either the best movie of the decade or one of the best. And, he made one of the best movies of the 2000s, just like he made possibly the best movie of 1970s, the 1980s, 1990s.
2010s.
2010s. Who knows what he'll do with Killers of the Flower Moon next year? Can't wait for that. But The Departed, I think, is just one of those movies in his filmography where it's like, how does this guy keep doing it? And when it comes to gangster movies, it's just as good as Goodfellas, I would say. Just they're very different kinds of gangsters.
I will say Goodfellas is lightning in a bottle.
Yeah.
It really is.
But from the craft standpoint, it's just
still
as
great,
good.
yeah.
Just as effective. But yeah, Goodfellas is probably a little better. But, I mean, there's no one like Scorsese. No one makes movies like him. He's just such a transcendent talent. And, you know, like I said, I've seen this movie like 15 times. Hadn't seen it in like 3 years.
Since you got wicked smart.
Since I got really good at analyzing movies, kid. And I watched it earlier today just to catch up on it.
Earlier
today, kid. And it blew my mind. And I'd seen it so many times before, and I knew everything that was going to happen, but still, it just takes me by surprise. And just seeing the production elements that, you know, you don't notice the first time you watch a movie. And he's just tremendous, and this movie is phenomenal. And I'm on film Twitter because I'm on Twitter. I run the Twitter account. I see a lot of people bashing The Departed pretty regularly. I saw a tweet the other day, someone bashing Jack Nicholson as Costello in this movie.
Really?
And it just blows my mind when I see those takes. Obviously, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but I mean, this movie is phenomenal. People don't make movies like this anymore. And Scorsese is just a rare gem in the world of artistry and directing. And love the guy to death. And I'm so glad we got to talk about him again recently.
Back to back weeks.
2 weeks in a row. It's pretty great.
Not bad. You doing Raging Bull next week?
I mean, maybe. We got to do some more great classics, I think, next month and next year.
Yeah.
But yeah, that wraps our episode on The Departed.
The Departed, guy.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode. Become a patron today at patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost Podcast. And be sure to get your tickets to our live show, which is on January 21st in downtown Los Angeles at the Dynasty Typewriter Theater at the Hayworth. You can get your tickets online at dynastytypewriter.com. You can even just go on the calendar there on their website, January 21st. You'll find our show there. Or on Instagram, you can see the link in our bio for getting tickets online. And so the in-person tickets are live right now, December 12th. Tickets for the digital live stream will be on sale as well. You can watch it anywhere in the world.
December 15th.
Yeah, what did I say?
12th.
I'm sorry, December 15th.
December 15th, yeah.
The live stream tickets will go on sale as well.
It's going to be wicked awesome, guy.
Can't freaking wait, kid.
Have a wicked piss a day, guys.
Take care. This episode of Raiders of the Lost Podcast was executive produced by our chosen one patrons: Luke Exelston, Tyler McFly, Darren Singleton, Anthony DeMeo, John A. Graz, Becca Keene, Cody Moen, Benjamin Cook, Calvin Cam, and Chandler Johnson. Thank you so much for supporting our show. Thank you for watching Raiders of the Lost Podcast. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button as well, notifications for sure. Listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere you can listen to podcasts, and be sure to check out this other content we have on our YouTube channel.